interest in cricket clubs that they just want to declare for the register of interest ahead of the start of the session. Perhaps Jo Stevens could start.
I'm a member of Glamorgan County Cricket Club and a member of Surrey County Cricket Club.
Julian Knight?
My register of interest, and I'm also a member of Worcestershire County Cricket Club.
And I am a member of the Marylebone Cricket Club. So that's our declarations out of the way. We're very grateful for the ECB joining us for this evidence session today. We've taken evidence from a number of governing bodies of sports in this country before, and so it's great to have the chance to do that with cricket. Cricket has gone through a period of substantial change in terms of its governance arrangements, and it gives us a chance to discuss those issues today. Given that we normally see the FA of all the national governing bodies, we don't often see trophies in the committee room. So we're delighted to see both the Women and Men's World Cups on display, being held by England as they are. But perhaps if I could ask Colin Graves first, perhaps you could just give the committee just a bit of an introduction into the way the ECB is set up now and some of the governance changes that you've brought into force.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for inviting us today to give us an opportunity to share with you our vision for cricket in the future. Yes, it's great to be sat here with 2 World Trophies, as the Chairman said. It's an ambition that we set out 4.5 years ago, and to achieve that has been fantastic. The ECB, virtually, a lot of people don't realise how it's formed and who actually owns the ECB. The ECB has 41 stakeholders. Of those 41 stakeholders, 18 are first-class counties, 17 of those 18 are members' clubs, and 1 is privately owned. There are then 21 other county cricket boards, which is owned and run by a lot of volunteers, and those are county cricket boards like Cheshire, Northumberland, Devon. And then the other 2 stakeholders are MCC and the Minor Counties Cricket Association. So that's our 41 stakeholders. Before we can do anything in cricket, whether it's changing our constitution, changing our articles of association, the board has to go to those stakeholders to change anything. And that's what we've done over the last 3 years on 2 occasions, which is important that you understand where we've come from and why we went that route. Firstly, to introduce a new tournament into our county schedule. We took that to our 41 stakeholders after hours and hours of discussion with them over nearly a year's period. And that vote went through 38-3. So it was a substantial support of that new competition. The actual 100 itself, I'm sure we'll come on to that later on, the actual 100 itself was then taken as a concept to the counties as the professional playing game for their votes, and that went through 17-1 for the new 100. Again, after a lot of consultation, many hours of discussion with their boards, committees and everybody else. And then the last big thing that we did 2 years ago was to change our governance model in accordance with what Sport England requirements were. And again, after a 1.5 year discussion with all our stakeholders, that went through on a vote of 41-0 to get the new governance to where we are today. And our new governance model at the ECB is it surpasses what Sport England expectations were. We now have 4 women out of a board of 12. So I believe we're in a fantastic place from where we were 4.5 years ago.
Great. Thank you. I mean, as you mentioned, I know the members have got a number of questions on the 100 in particular.
Sure.
We'll come on to that a bit later on. Lord Patel, do you want to...
Could I just add a little bit to Colin, just to give your view? I joined about 4 years ago, and I'm phenomenally excited of where cricket is today. Not only have we produced what I believe is an excellent strategy for 2020 to 2024 that's rooted in the game, that looks across the game. But as Colin mentioned, the governance changes have been really extensive. We've surpassed the Sport England Code governance. We have a fully independent board. We have enough cricket expertise. We have a system in place where we'll continue to engage and continue to speak, a phenomenal staff team, and I must say, supported by 5 years of financial stability, which I think is really important. And with 42,000 volunteers in the network, it's a result of why we get these.
Yeah. For the board structure itself, I mean, one thing that strikes me as being, let's say, a substantial difference, say, to the Football Association board, is there's no representation at the moment for the 18 first-class counties, whereas with the football board you have the national game and the professional game with separate representation. Is that? Do you think? I mean, Lord Patel is the senior independent director. Do you think that is something that should change? That there should be either an individual county representative or someone chosen by the counties to represent them?
I mean, my experience of representative councils in a number of environments has always shown me that having representatives on a board, it doesn't always fulfil the best outcomes. I think having a board that's unitary, that's focused on the outcome of the organisation, that's focused on, in this case, cricket, with expertise in relevant areas. So out of the 12 members, we have obviously the Chief Exec and the Chief Financial Officer. We have 5 independent people with cricket knowledge, including an ex-England fast bowler. And we have 4 people who obviously have a passion about cricket but are not connected to cricket in any way, shape or form. So I think it's given us, for me, it's certainly given us far more transparency, far more clarity about where we're going. Decision making has been much improved to what I saw when I first joined.
Yeah, but it is unusual in a way that there's no kind of like the 18 first-class counties don't necessarily have a voice on the board, so to speak.
I absolutely agree with that.
One of the minor counties has that seat in a way.
And I think my view, and I think other people's views, and we had 3 independent reviews that helped us to come to this conclusion, is actually having one person from one county is not the best way to engage. The best way to engage is actually engage with all the people. So all the board members of 4 counties that we buddy with, and we'll swap every year. So we're out there constantly listening and talking and engaging. We have first-class chairman meetings regularly. We have chief executives meetings regularly. And I think that engagement, and last year we held our first complete professional game group board. So I think it's really important that we're constantly engaging and not forgetting the recreational game in that and the volunteers as well.
Clare, Colin, if I could ask you, do you want to come on and talk a bit about the sort of are we, as a consequence of the success of the men's and women's teams, are we going through? Is this a moment for cricket? A moment to increase engagement with cricket? And what do you see as being the opportunities for engagement to get more women playing cricket? It seems already at school level that cricket is becoming the kind of default summer sport for many schools now, replacing traditional games like rounders that would have been played. But what do you see as the opportunity for women's cricket at the moment?
I think it's the biggest opportunity we've ever had as a sport, and I'd say that across both the men's and women's games. I think when we won the Women's World Cup in 2017, a lot of people said to me in interviews, this will be a watershed moment for women's cricket in this country. And I remember saying at the time, we'll only know that when we look back and see whether we made sure that it was. What the platform of winning that World Cup and the full house at Lord's and the engagement and 180 million people watching around the world, I think what that's shown us is that there is huge optimism and appetite for women's sport and specifically women's cricket in this country, more than ever before. We see that as well when we follow the fortunes of the Lionesses and other women's sports teams. And what it's given us is it's given us the opportunity to put a very comprehensive plan together for the next 5 years. Transform women's and girls' cricket is one of 6 priorities within Inspiring Generations, our new strategy. And that is a plan that will see £20 million invested over the next 2 years, with an ambition that the board have stated to invest 50 million over 5 years. Those are huge numbers into women's sport. And that plan will see us look to increase the representation of women and girls across the sport in all areas, whether that's in playing, in coaching, in other workforce roles. It will see the introduction of more secondary school opportunities for girls, probably in association with Chance to Shine, who I know you're speaking to later. We'll be creating a new professional structure for domestic female players. Next year we'll have 3 times as many professional female players in this country than we've ever had. And I think it's really important that what we have to take very seriously is that investment works for the whole pathway. So of that 20 million, there'll be equal investment into participation and performance. And And, you know, I've had a lifetime in the game. I've been a teacher, I've coached cricket, I've played for England, I've worked for the ECB now for 9 years, and I've certainly never been more excited by what's ahead of us.
Yeah. And obviously, as a Kent MP, I know Kent regards itself as one of the leading counties for women's cricket. I mean, do you think there are areas of the country where there's more of a job to be done, more of a focus to get to support the development of women's cricket?
Oh yeah, we've got a long way to go, without doubt. You know, we are underrepresented on and off the pitch in our sport. But what I think we've got now is a very serious commitment at every level of the organisation to change that. We've got a strategy for growth. We have seen it is our biggest growth opportunity across the game. We've seen the numbers of clubs grow from 550 in 2015 to 850 now, but we still know that that's only about 15% of our overall club number. And there are pockets of the country that haven't really engaged well enough with the women's and girls' game, but you know that has to come from us. I think what we've done well in securing this trophy is we have over the last 5 years invested really well into the elite end of the women's game through professional contracts for England, through the development of the Kia Super League, and I think now is the time to really make sure we're growing the game in terms of participants across clubs up and down the country.
Yeah, thank you. Sure.
So just to add to that, and I think it's really important in terms of women and girls, I just want to give one example. On the back of our very successful South Asian strategy, we are now have some funds to recruit 2,000 South Asian women across 4 years to become mentors and cricket coaches. And one example of that was 3 months ago at Bradford Park Avenue, and I've never seen it in my life, and I've lived there all my life. We had 600 people watching 44 women, England, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, playing cricket at Park Avenue. Women from A&E doctors, solicitors to students to unemployed people. It was an amazing sight that proves we're actually beginning, but really hitting something that we never thought we'd do.
Great, thank you. Tom Harrison, do you feel this is a sort of national moment for cricket on the back of for men's cricket on the back of the World Cup victory?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Chair. I think this summer's been obviously has given us a fantastic platform to grow from, and I think that's the exciting thing. I think going into hosting a men's cricket World Cup is a once in a generation opportunity. We hadn't had the opportunity since '99. We won't have the opportunity again for a very long time. But the opportunity to take advantage of that, be ready for the bounce that comes out of a year like that, is something that is the opportunity that we now have. So I think we are really, really well set up to go forward and implement Inspiring Generations as a strategy for the next 5 years. Actually feel that the next 5 years, with financial stability, a transformational reach profile for the game in respect of media, and clubs that feel engaged and excited about the future, with a plan to grow the game so that we can go back to market in a few years' time and demonstrate we have grown the sport in an incredibly competitive environment. I think it's a very exciting time.
I mean, some people have compared this summer to the 2005 Ashes series, but in some ways, whilst that was an amazing triumph, that didn't lead to a renaissance in cricket in this country. If anything, it started a decline. Well, it was a decline, and some people might say that one of the reasons for that was the switch from free-to-air television to pay TV. But why do you think that 2005, whilst it was the start of an era of improved success for the England Test team, it was also the start of an era of declining financial success of the counties and declining attendance at the grounds?
Well, I think it's a complex issue. I think if you look at where the game was in 2005, we had very different issues there. I think we needed to invest a lot in stadia. We needed to provide an environment where our stadia could get up to scratch. We needed to provide an environment where professional cricketers in this country felt that it was an aspirational career at all levels, that they wanted to be professional cricketers, and there was work to be done around that. And I think the fruits of what was sown back then have you do not get the kind of success that we've seen through the last few years, obviously culminating in the Men's Cricket World Cup this summer and the Women's World Cup in 2017. It doesn't come without substantial investment. I think the decline to which you're referring is a more complex issue. We're dealing with enormous lifestyle changes. We're seeing the kind of figures that other sports are also facing in respect of challenges around participation. I just think we're better placed than we've ever been to address those challenges through the plan that we've built. And as Clare has outlined, the excitement around women's cricket and girls' cricket around the country, the huge impact that we're having in schools, as you rightly pointed out, and the exciting plans we've got to build on that, as well as massive investment into the county game over the next 5 years, putting £500 million into our core network over the next 5 years. So I think it is a time to be very optimistic about the potential for us to put cricket in a very firm footing over the next few years.
I mean, a lot of the sort of buzz around the World Cup final, I think, was the fact it was on Channel 4. When was that decision made that it would be jointly broadcast with Channel 4 and Sky?
Well, ultimately, the ICC rights are ICC owned and marketed. Clearly, we've got a very close relationship with Sky. We had conversations leading into the World Cup to contemplate what might happen were England to be successful throughout the tournament and get towards the latter stages. Obviously, going in as one of the favourites, it was something we all very much hoped for. And at that point, conversations were had throughout the World Cup as it became, well, not immediately likely that we were going to get through to those latter stages, but when it became clear that that was going to happen, it was a conversation that happened between ICC with Sky and with ECB to ensure that the negotiations that subsequently took place had our approval, if you like, and obviously they did, and we were thrilled with the results and remain incredibly pleased and proud of our relationship with Sky, who have made a lot of this investment in our game possible. We're very reliant on them.
So I was interested to know whose idea it was when the idea was first floated.
Well, I think ultimately, when you're looking at hosting a World Cup in your backyard, you sense that there's an opportunity. I think responsible partnerships come up with those conversations automatically. I think we do have a very hugely responsible partner in Sky, and we work very closely with them. So,
because it seemed to be one of those, it wasn't something anyone had talked about before the World Cup, and seemed to happen just at the last minute.
No, not at all. I think not all of our conversations are made public, and I think ultimately it's a sign that you do have responsible partnerships operating in terms of marketing the game of cricket in this country.
I was told that Channel 4 approached Sky about it directly. It was sort of their idea.
Well, look, I can tell you that in the lead up to the Cricket World Cup, there were conversations at senior level between ECB and Sky contemplating activity should the outcome be what it was.
Okay.
Ultimately.
So wherever the request for it wasn't, it was something that had been anticipated.
Whether or not other people were proactive in that conversation, I'm sure they were. It's a very obvious thing with something as exciting as a Cricket World Cup to come up with.
Great, thank you. Ian Lucas.
It was actually my idea.
You kept that under your hat.
No, it's more.
So how much money has been reinvested in the game as a result of the additional Sky broadcasting revenue since 2005?
Well, that's a very good question. There are, if I could answer it this way, clearly the England team environment is entirely reliant on the revenue that the ECB provide, and our first-class county network would be our counties have a different level of reliance on ECB, whether you're talking about some of the more powerful counties in respect of revenue generation, right through to counties that may be as much as 65% reliant on ECB revenue to pay for their annual cost. In simplified terms, you can say that the cost is basically paying for first-class cricket. It's probably it's a crude way of measuring it.
It may have been a good question, but you haven't really answered it, because what I want is some figures in terms of the amount of money that has been spent since 2005 within cricket as a result of the broadcasting revenues.
Okay, well, I can come up with the number. Can I write to you and give you that number?
Yeah,
because I can.
It's been a lot of money there, isn't it?
It's a massive amount of money. Absolutely,
it's been a lot of money.
What I can say, to probably give you a bit more flesh on the bone there, is we are moving into a scenario from 2020 to 24 where we are around 75% reliant on pay TV for the revenue for English cricket, for ECB. So it is a substantial amount of reliance, and it enables us to invest to the extent that we are doing into the grassroots of the game, into the professional.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking the question is because I've got some figures about participation in cricket in recent years, which concern me, because monthly cricket participation fell from 403,000 in 2011 to 279,000 in 2016, which is a huge fall over that period. And some of us, way back in 2005, I love cricket. I think it's the greatest game in the world. In 2005, I had lots of discussions with people like Charles Clarke about the fact that this was leaving free-to-air TV, and I was very concerned about it. And I've heard, and I'm delighted that you're sitting where you are with those trophies on either side of you, and you've presented a very sunny picture thus far. But I'm really concerned about the fact that these participation figures are as they are. And I think that that is a lot to do with the fact that we do not have free-to-air coverage on our screens. So how would you explain the fall in participation?
I think it's a complex issue, Mr. Lucas, and I also think that it's impossible to separate the fact that in 2005 there was a transitional change in the exposure of cricket to audiences at that time. However, we're also going through, we take 2005 as an example. We have 40% of people in this country at that time only had 5 channels on their TV set. We had a very different approach 3 years before an iPad was invented. It's a very different media environment to the one we're looking at now. So however complex the environment is for participation since that time, I think cricket is in the best possible place to be able to answer some of the issues that you've raised in participation.
So can I put it a different way then? What are you going to do differently now to stop the level of participation falling in the same way as it has done in the past? Because you've had all this extra money over that period, and the participation has fallen. So what are you going to do differently?
Well, first of all, we are signatories to the voluntary code, which means that 30% of our revenue will effectively be going to grassroots causes through the next 5 years. That's a substantial increase on the investment that's happened over the past 15 years, if you like. We've got a transformational reach profile. We are going back onto the BBC with live cricket next year. So we're capitalising on
So implicit in that answer is the fact that you think the fact you haven't been on free-to-air TV has been disadvantageous. Do you agree with that?
I think that we're in a position now where the environment for media, the environment for making those decisions looking forward, gives us the opportunity to do so now, with a product that is, which will drive audiences and hopefully wider audiences for cricket in this country, for the betterment of all of cricket over the next 5 years. We're very excited about that. Viewers will be able to watch cricket, over 100 hours of cricket on free-to-air.
I'd love to have been able to watch cricket since 2005, but the ECB made the decision that they weren't going to do that. And I think a lot of people who would have come to love cricket have missed out in that period.
Yeah.
And you're saying that one part of your strategy, and I welcome it, is to get it back onto free-to-air TV. Don't do this again, please.
If I can just try and finish that question off as well, Mr. Lucas, please, if I can. Because I was, at that point in time, part of a county, so I know where you're coming from a county perspective. I think, as Tom says, the game has changed over those years for a lot of reasons. I think the ECB at that time possibly missed one or two tricks. One thing we've done in the last 3 years is invest in children's cricket, kids cricket, from 5 to 8. We've launched the All Stars programme, which has got us 80,000 children playing cricket this year in cricket. If we'd have done that before, it could have been in a different place. We've started, I believe, to square that circle.
But we were told, I was told personally, when that there's going to be lots of investment in cricket clubs because of the extra revenue that you were receiving in 2005. You had the chance to shine scheme throughout the period. So I thought that was happening anyway. I thought that was the reason why, or part of the reason why you were taking the extra money from Sky.
Well, it was invested to the level that the ECB received at that point in time. From next year, our revenues virtually double. And the broadcasters, not only are paying for broadcasting, they're actually wanting to invest into participation. So from that point of view, it is now a different relationship with the broadcasters going forward.
Could I add one small point of focus on this? Okay. I think it is common knowledge that sort of team sports have dropped generally, and I think one of the big issues certainly for us is the lack of facilities and the opportunity to play cricket in schools. And so one of our biggest areas of going forward is, you mentioned Chance to Shine, to double the revenue to Chance to Shine, to double the number of primary schools we're going into, and coming to secondary school with girls, because I think it's really important we get cricket back. That's why I learned my cricket, back into schools and work with young children.
Mr. Dix, could I also sort of try and shine a bit more light on the media profile going forward, because it's clearly not just about free-to-air TV. It is also about understanding the way in which consumers now are consuming sport, and it is very diverse. It's obviously across multiple social media channels. It's things like YouTube. It's things like, yes, it's highlights, and we'll have highlights of every night of international cricket next year going onto the BBC. We will also have, for domestic cricket fans in this country, of which we have a growing number, in a thriving environment for domestic cricket, we'll be able to, counties themselves will be able to stream live cricket that isn't broadcast on TV. These are transformational changes for people who want to see more cricket.
Yeah, they are transformational changes, but the way that we have a national event is we come together for occasions like the World Cup final, and we see it. And the fact that it was on free-to-air TV made it an even bigger event than it otherwise would have been. We're all enjoying the Rugby World Cup at the minute, which thankfully is on free-to-air TV, and its impact is increased. I mean, I personally think 5-day test cricket I'd love to see that, at least one test, please, the Lord's Test, for example, on free-to-air TV. And I think that will really be a tremendous incentive and showcase for the game. And I've made that argument repeatedly since 2005. And whilst I accept we're in a changing media environment, I think the evidence of the success of the World Cup final this year is plain, and it was this year. Yeah.
Look, I think in terms of the potential scenario where one test match a year is on free-to-air TV, the last time this study was done was back in 2008, which predates my involvement, but during the Davis review, I believe, there was the ECB undertook an economic impact study that looked at the potential cost to the game, if you like, of a game being on free-to-air television, just in terms of monetary terms. And that was basically £137.4 million to list one test match a year for 2014 to 17. That was the estimated value. That is around 48% of the domestic broadcast rights income. And if you take that now into a 2020 to 2024 scenario, that strategic premium for a pay TV operator effectively makes the strategic investment into inspiring generations extremely difficult for us to justify.
I think it's difficult to justify that the participation figures have fallen from 403,000 to 279,000 between 2011 and 2016.
Yeah.
I wonder how many Ben Stokes we lost in that period.
Well, I think we've got a much better story to tell now on participation, and I think we estimate in our figures we've got 2.7 million people playing cricket. We've got 1.5 million children, and that's a growing number because of the kind of thing that we're doing with All Stars cricket. We've got something else coming through the pipeline as well, which is the next stage of All Stars, which is 8 to 11-year-olds, which is a crucial time in children's decision making about which sports they're going to undertake as they move into adulthood. we're going to be continuing to look at our school strategy as well, and I'm very happily ask Clare to talk a little bit about this as well, because this is another area where we're very uncomfortable with the profile that we have at sport, and we'd love government's help to help us drive more participation for children through the school curriculum.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think what has been pleasing from our perspective has been to see growth, year-on-year growth in women's and girls' participation. That's obviously very important as we look to grow the sport and make it more inclusive, which is obviously the right thing to do for any sport, but also will stand us in good commercial state as well. We welcome everything that's coming out from government around the school sport and activity plan. We would like to see that. We would like to see an hour of school sport a day for every child. We think that, as a former teacher, that the emphasis placed on physical education should be as equal as other academic literacy or education subjects.
Well, I agree with all of that, but on women's participation, Mr. Chairman, I'm conscious of time. Hasn't the big impact with football been because we've had live women's games on TV?
I think it'll be a factor, without doubt. It will be a factor.
It's been a massive factor.
Yeah.
Because, 5-10 years ago we didn't have that.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary the change that's happened.
And we're excited by that.
It's
we're excited. We want a period where we have live, and then we're going into that now. Yeah, we are going into that now. And we've still seen growth every year since 2015 in women's club cricket and in girls playing cricket in schools. And the number of girls within our All-Stars programme is nearly at 30% of the overall figure. We believe that should be 50-50. There's no reason why 5-year-old girls and 5-year-old boys shouldn't be equally participating in cricket. So we will be really ambitious in that area. We will grow the number of women's and girls club sections so that it isn't a postcode lottery, and so that a woman or a girl feels that her local cricket club is welcoming and inclusive for her.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about the 100 in a second, but just to follow up actually on Ian's points there, and actually the state sector. I mean, when I grew up, basically, it was like you played football for 9/10 of the year, and then maybe for a week you may get a game of cricket. While the private school down the road have tons of facilities and those pitches, and as we know, the percentage of England cricketers who are from private schools far exceeds the national average in that respect. You mentioned, Mr. Harrison, about government help. What are you actually doing in terms of the conversation you're having? What specific help do you actually need to see happen in order to get cricket into the system?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Knight, for the question. I think ultimately we would like, we've seen the consultation recently which came out to us. I think we would like to see a kind of push towards physical literacy being part of the national curriculum in the same way that maths and English is. I think that kind of emphasis on children getting an understanding about the benefits that active lifestyles can give you is fundamental at any age. But we would like to back any move in that direction that will help kids understand that sport needs to be part of their daily lives as young as possible, and something that schools take seriously.
And when you say back, do you mean financial? Because your revenue is going to go up, going to double in the next year. So are you actually effectively in conversation in order to... Because the keys are, when it comes to... Because I deal with the APP chief for financial education in schools. Yeah. And the keys are always the fact that effectively you've got to try and... you've got to teach the teachers how to teach.
Absolutely.
In outside of their core subjects.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What do you want to actually see happen over the next year or two in that respect?
We've identified exactly that. And the school strategy over the next year will be working on establishing deeper, more meaningful relationships with teachers rather than necessarily with schools themselves, because the teachers move and the teachers, there will be churn across schools in the teaching population. So we've established essentially, especially around our girls' secondary school strategy from next year, that, and particularly primary school, where over 80% of the teachers are female, they are our workforce. They are our advocates within those classroom environments and playground environments, and we've got to have a better relationship with them. And any support government can give, or the Department for Education can give, on how we raise awareness and educate and train teachers better around all sport would be welcome.
but what specifically you're offering to do in terms of, you said the education department can do this. Well, I've been trying to do that with it's a difficult ask, put it like that. What do you actually going to offer to do as a sport in order to effectively get into these schools, get into these teachers, and actually say to them, actually teach them what to do?
We are going to be delivering a lot more teacher training around how to deliver basic, short format, softball cricket to begin with, age and stage appropriate formats and activities, so that children have a good first experience of the game, so that they can do that for a 6-week block in school and then be signposted to their local All-Stars club or their local club once
and
they
the key unlock this always basically is girls cricket more than anything else, do you think?
We think it is in secondary schools because our research, and Laura Cordingley may well touch on this later, our research shows with Chance to Shine that when girls go to secondary school, they are still much more malleable and impressionable about trying a new sport. Boys at that age have pretty much decided which sports are for them, which sports they're good at, and whether they're sporty or they're not sporty. And the research shows, Chance to Shine's research shows, we shouldn't claim the credit for it, that girls going into secondary schools are much more likely to try a new sport. So that's where we're really tackling that age group, and in conjunction with club sections as well, so that they can play in their secondary school and then feel welcomed at a local club.
Okay, just on the 100. Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
You mentioned the fact that you played football 9 months and then a couple of weeks at cricket. We're working with a lot of communities now who would like to play cricket 365 days a year, indoor facilities. So one of the areas, so we're investing in non-turf pitches, 1,000 non-turf pitches in the next 2 years. We're investing in trying to build urban cricket centres. So we've identified 3 areas. We've built our first one and launched it during the World Cup at Leighton. And I've just been down there to see them. It's been open 2 or 3 months. We're getting between 400 and 450 children from all backgrounds coming in playing. And I've had a discussion with the leader of the council to say, and I think this is a relationship with local government, to say, can we set up an education facility and a health screening facility in the ground, because you're getting access to children and families that you normally wouldn't do. So I think it's not just central government but local government, where we have shared the cost of that urban centre 50-50.
Okay, just on the 100, I've had quite a lot of correspondence on this actually. I'm looking on, even the other day on Twitter, when the auction was ongoing, there was actually a hashtag Stop the 100, and that was actually trending in the UK. I mean, it feels quite extraordinary actually. I mean, are you worried, Mr. Graves, about effectively why is your customer base seem to dislike the idea so much?
Look, I would answer that by saying that the 100 is all about growing the game of cricket in this country and protecting the things that we value the most. You know, we've just seen throughout the Cricket World Cup, we've seen grounds across this country packed to the rafters full of fans, 40% of whom were first-time buyers to cricket in this country. The vibrancy, the colour, the noise, the energy in those crowds is something I think will live with all of us. The 100 is an attempt to replicate some of that and bring it back to our country every single year without taking anything away from our precious county environment at the moment, in which we're investing over £500 million over the next 5 years to ensure that we're taking every advantage we can to grow the game of cricket in this country. That is our job, and we have to do that in the most, you know, the 100 is a really good way of protecting everything that we're serious about. It's about protecting Test cricket. It's about protecting 4-day championship cricket. It's about getting more kids playing cricket at school. The number of people that I've had coming to me saying my kids are crazy about the 100. They're doing their draft, they're doing their practice drafts with their mates. They're playing games with the new teams that have been developed. This is engaging at a different level with a completely new community of cricket fans in this country, and that's something that we should embrace and celebrate. It is not a threat to the county game. It's a much greater threat to rest on our laurels and say everything is rosy in our garden. We're going to be absolutely fine if we just keep ticking along as we are.
But when it comes to, I was reading Vic Marks's autobiography recently. It's quite a long book actually. And in that, he suggested that effectively the reason why that you're going for the 100 is that you've missed the boat on the 2020. That you came with this great idea. It's a bit like the analogy I would use is like LCD was invented in Edinburgh but was exploited by the Japanese in Silicon Valley. And in the same way you invented 2020, you had this original sort of big sort of uplift of interest. And then either we did the rest on those, or actually the management at that time, prior to your time, actually then sort of ignored it or didn't do what they should have done. At the IPL, went massive, huge, the draft, everything else. So really what you're trying to do is to effectively, you're sort of now repositioning in order to try and make up that lost ground.
If I can try and answer where you're coming from, and I think I know where you're coming from, is if you look back, a lot of people will say, yes, we missed the boat with our T20. We didn't push it enough, we didn't invest in it enough, etc. And the world passed us and got ahead of us in a lot of areas. I think people will agree with that. But I think the one thing with cricket, and I'm like you, I'm a passionate cricket supporter ever since I was 10 and 13, that's when I started playing. But I think one thing with cricket, it is adaptable and it is changeable. If you look back over the years, when I started playing, it was just red ball cricket. Then we went to the John Player League on a Sunday, which was 40 over cricket. Then we went to 50 over cricket. Then we brought in T20. And now, somewhere around the world, they are even looking at T10 cricket. So the game is changing. And the one thing why this game changes, and I certainly believe in this, is because it adapts to the audiences that we try and get involved. So I think what we do is give cricket to everybody for different audiences, and I think that's important.
Okay. Listen, can I just sort of add a little bit of information and data onto the back of this? Because we've done an enormous amount of work through Inspiring Generation, through landing the strategy with our network and our stakeholders and fans in this country. I think we undertook an enormous amount of work, research. We collated research from numerous different places. We've got 10.5 people in this country who care about cricket to a larger extent or lesser extent. We, on average, are successful in bringing around 1.1 million of those into grounds through our county competitions at the moment. This summer we brought 3.15 million people into grounds in this country. Largely, obviously, the back of the World Cup and the Ashes was great, but it was also the most successful summer that we've ever had for domestic cricket as well. So we're building on very, very strong foundations here. But the reality is we've got an enormous pocket of fans who, for whatever reason, and we've looked at the reasons, they're not embracing the cricket opportunities as they exist at the moment.
And it's part of the reason for that. It's part of the reason for that. There was actually just the sort of fuddy-duddiness, effectively, of the county names, as opposed, because now obviously they're now city franchises. Or
they're not franchises, they're teams. But yes, I take your point. And look, let's look at the profile of an English cricket fan. And this is, this does not reflect where we've been in the World Cup. And anyone who's spent time in World Cup cricket matches or who was at the Women's World Cup final in 2017 at Lord's on that famous day, I think, the average cricket fan is 50 years old. We've got 77% male bias and 82% bias towards white British. So we've got an awfully big opportunity awaiting us if we get this right to create an environment for cricket which is reflective of where this country is going in terms of its multicultural appeal, our ability to get diverse and urban communities turning up in their droves to watch the game they really enjoy and they love but don't feel part of. That is part of what the 100 is about, and I think we can do that.
I've got two further questions, that's okay. There was some talk, we mentioned healthier lifestyles earlier on. Looking at the following names: Butterkist, KP, Tyrrells, Skips, Hula Hoops, McCoys, Pop Chips, Ridge Crisps. Now, it does sound like a school disco buffet, but is this basically, is this in terms of that healthy lifestyle? These are obviously the sponsors of the 100. How does this fit into that idea of young people being inspired when they've got these particular manufacturers and these food manufacturers sponsoring the 100?
Look, no one in this room is going to challenge the fact that we have a child obesity crisis in this country. But cricket is very serious about our ambition to get young people playing cricket. And we believe that we can do that in a responsible way by partnering with an organisation that can reach families and young people in a way that we can't, and we haven't been successful at in the past. What we are trying to do through this is send messages about education, and McKinsey have done a study that assesses the trigger points which address some of the issues which lead to child obesity. One of those is about education, and we're going to be basically giving bits of information on every single item that is sold to kids, on informing them about healthy, balanced lifestyles, informing them about the requirement or the importance of having balanced diets and healthy lifestyles. For example, the investment that comes from this partnership will enable us to put 100 changing rooms for women's and girls around cricket clubs in this country. It will enable us to put 250 turf pitches into urban communities around the country. So I think we've demonstrated that we've got a responsible attitude towards commercial partnerships. We've done that in the past, and we are very committed to ensuring this is a further example of how we can address an issue, a very serious issue, in a positive way through cricket.
Just finally, online ticket touting, obviously it's something that we've covered quite majorly on this committee. I mean, what sort of, I have concerns about what could actually happen there when it comes to the 100. I mean, how are you going to address that, and what action do you need to see happen?
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Knight. I think ultimately we would, we're very supportive of legislation which protects ticket buyers, and particularly stopping people making huge profits on the secondary ticket market. Next year, in 2020 and 2022, when we have the Commonwealth Games, it's interesting that the Commonwealth Games ticketing will be protected by ticketing legislation, but the 100, which will immediately follow it, will not be. So anything that government can help us with in terms of protecting our ticket buyers would be much appreciated. We've been close in the past in this space and found it hasn't managed to quite get to the point.
And what do you specifically need? Do you need a change in the law effectively?
I think we do, yeah. We would like to have a change in the law that it makes it illegal for people to buy, to sell tickets over and above face value on the secondary ticket market.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Jesse.
Mr. Graves, I think probably my question should go to you. Who invented the 100?
Who invented the 100? That's a good question. I think it was invented, if we want to call it invented. I think it was thought about and developed by ourselves at ECB, our own in-house commercial team, working with various advisors and consultants looking at what we could develop. So virtually in-house, really.
Right, because it's not played anywhere else in the world, is it? This is a totally new concept.
At this point in time, no. But all I can tell you is that the rest of the world is looking at it. I represent ECB at ICC meetings. I can tell you there's at least 4 countries out there who are looking at how it develops, and they are certainly interested in it.
Can I have one small point? What we did do differently with the 100 was appoint a subcommittee, and that committee was not what you'd regard as sort of people who just were interested and passionate about cricket, but they had backgrounds in entertainment, they'd done the opening of the Rugby World Cup, they were responsible for bands, they really understood what brings crowds to stadia and what excites families and children. And I think that challenge, from a financial background, as a media background and an events background, with a passion for cricket, really helped to shape some of the thoughts that have gone into it.
And was there anybody who was a cricket fan, a cricket supporter?
They were all cricket fans.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But as a kind of supporters representative, any supporters representative in that thinking, in that group?
As I said, the consultation that goes into the kind of thing that the 100 is, but way beyond that, into Inspiring Generations. The 100 is one of 26 activities which makes up the strategy for cricket over the next 5 years. We had an enormous amount of consultation through that process with all of our stakeholders, whether they were officially first-class counties, national counties, or whether they were made up of different supporters groups or different views that were taken across the table. All of that was put together in putting a document for Inspiring Generations and effectively embedding that strategy into the place.
I was interested in the
so,
before that.
Yeah. So
the
before
concept,
you get
the idea, coming up with the idea.
When you say the 100, are you referring to the new competition in terms of the structure of new teams,
no,
etc.?
The actual idea
format
of
itself.
having the format.
Right.
Yeah.
So the way that our governance structures work internally is that we will always take those kind of decisions through cricket committee, particularly in this case, because it is a cricketing playing condition. It's not actually a completely different format. It's a playing condition that is effectively changing here. We consulted a lot with the MCC because we needed to have their support, because effectively what is happening here is we're actually changing the concept of overs within a cricket match. So it required MCC and oversight with respect to the laws of the game. And then the support, obviously, of all of our stakeholders, which is critical. And as Colin said at the outset, we had a number of votes through this process. I think to suggest that this hasn't been properly consulted is incorrect. I think, and
I'm not making that suggestion.
No, I know, but I'm wondering
mouth,
whether that's been behind it. Yeah. There was huge consultation, and we've got to a place where if you draw the parallels with 2003 and beyond, the comparison in terms of consultation and planning. And the way in which this has been embedded itself into our plans is completely different to the way it was back in 2003, for example.
Okay, so you presumably had a budget for it when you started the 100. What was the budget and how much does it cost? How are you doing against your budgeting? So
the P&L is something that's been signed off by the county game. We obviously, when we first developed a P&L for the 100, it was one of 5 different options that was put to the game as this is before the broadcast media rights process, where we were assessing how could we adapt T20 to fulfil our audience ambitions, to fulfil our effectively the role that T20 needs to play for the game in this country. How could we achieve that and at the same time seek to widen cricket's audience in this country? We had 5 options. The options were all broadly valued. That is 3 years. That is 3 years ago. That is 3 years ago. The budget has obviously moved from that point as the development of the concept comes to light, and you realise that there are costs. We actually added a women's tournament, which wasn't contemplated.
A simple question: what was the budget, and how much have you spent?
The budget is in line with the game's expectations right now, and
which is how much?
Which, yeah, the budget is in line with the game's expectations. I'm not going to reveal what that is.
So you don't want to tell us how much this competition is costing?
We do. We have a valuation, right, which was met in the process to broadcast budget, and the tournament budget, which is being, the tournament hasn't happened yet. It's happening next year. Mm-hmm. We're in the budget planning process, and we're planning the budget now for next year, which will go through the board, through the proper governance structures, and will be revealed after, will effectively be confirmed in time for next year. So we haven't done budgets for any part of our business next year yet, as in approved budgets.
You've obviously spent money on it so far.
Yeah.
Have you met the budget in terms of your spend so far, or have you overspent against budget?
The budget is in line with the expectations of the 100 board and the ECB board.
Okay. So what's wrong with T20?
Absolutely nothing. It's been a phenomenal format, which has, I think, done an amazing role for cricket internationally. I think it's something that, when it was launched in 2003 in this country, I think the sense that it would have grown to where it is now globally would have not been understood. I think that's clear. 2020 is a fantastic format, and it's why we want the county, our county stakeholders, to have ownership of it in this country and be able to build something which is doing incredibly well and having some phenomenal success. We've had 8 consecutive years of growth. We're continuing to invest more and more every year into it, and we want that to be the case for the next 8 years. We want to continue growing it. So there's nothing wrong with it at all.
I think there's one, if I can add one thing, just to answer your question. The new tournament actually brought terrestrial television broadcasters back to the table. if we hadn't have had the new tournament and just stuck with the existing T20 competition, then I can assure you terrestrial broadcasters would not have been back at the table in 2020.
Okay, so that would suggest that there is something wrong with T20 then?
No,
you can't
there is nothing wrong with T20 at all. I agree with Tom. We're not saying that. T20 works for a market. We are looking at a new market as well as existing as well. And we believe, and we've done all the research and we've done everything that we need to do, we believe there is a market there for a new tournament. And that's why, around the world, T10 is starting to happen. You know, why are they doing T10? Because they believe there's a market for it.
Okay. So, Stephen, can I just try and shed some light on this?
That would be helpful.
Okay. Look, the research we've done about these 10.5 million fans suggests that the things that prevent them from coming to cricket at the moment, from really getting involved in cricket, is the time that it takes, even for T20, which can now run into, in some parts of the world, IPLs going beyond 4.25 hours for an evening's for a match. So time, the complexity of the game, so the way that it's presented can be often can be confusing for new audiences, and the way in which the game is positioned in this country. So the fact that there is a sense that, you know, our whole strategy is about making cricket a game for everyone. So every community in this country can say it's a game for me. And for whatever reason, without tampering with T20 Vitality Blast, which is a brilliant competition, it's nearly pulling in 1 million people every year now. It's astonishingly successful. There is still more work for us to do, and the information that we get back from our partners in this, our insight partners, tell us that there is massive room for growth. The World Cup tells us that. The Women's World Cup tells us that. So what we're trying to do is tap into that, and if we are successful, which we are very sure we will be, we'll grow everything in the pie. There won't be a part of the game that is suffering as a result of the success of one part of the game or other. And at the same time, what we're doing, and I've been a huge advocate at ICC for the World Test Championship and protecting global Test cricket, this will create a new set of fans for Test cricket. Because still, it doesn't matter where you are in this country, the thing that young people still want to do is play cricket for their country.
I hope you're right. I mean, I really struggle with the idea that the 100 is going to help T20 and 50-over cricket and the Kia Super League. You know, they are going to be I think they will be downgraded or sacrificed on the back of this new tournament. I really hope I'm wrong, but that's my concern. I wanted to ask why the women's finals day next year is going to be played on a Friday, because if you're trying to attract new audiences and grow women's cricket in the way that, you know, it has done over the last couple of years, it's had 2 really successful finals weekends at Hove. Why put it on a Friday? That's going to restrict the people who can go to it.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think, you know, we just on your former point about the Kia Super League, I'm personally excited about the 100 from a women's game point of view, and I think it is really important to say that. Sport has never before launched a professional competition for both genders at the same time. And I think in our ambitions to make cricket more gender balanced, to be able to have men's and women's teams playing under the same team names, we've seen it work brilliantly well in the Big Bash and the Women's Big Bash, where they added the Women's Big Bash after 4 years. It's absolutely taken women's cricket through the roof in Australia. So I'm really optimistic that the Women's 100 will be a great addition to our professionalising of the women's game and our opportunity to show girls and women that cricket is for them as well. In terms of scheduling, that's around broadcasters, and it will also be in school holidays. So obviously the focus for the 100 in the men's and women's game is that it will be played during the school holidays. We wouldn't want to put it up against a high-profile men's game at a weekend. That would be foolish, and so we believed that the Friday was the best option.
Okay. So, Clare, you just mentioned about parity and, you know, launching the 100 for men and women at the same time. But it's very stark, because the highest salary for men playing in the 100 is £125,000, and for women it's £15,000. Now, you know, how can we possibly justify such a huge discrepancy in those pay levels?
That's a good question, and I thought that would come next. I think I really believe that we have to be realistic about the journey that we're on. It was only 5 years ago that we had our first round of centrally contracted professional female players for England. That journey has been huge in terms of pay from where we started for those England players to where they are now. Of course, they're not paid the same as Joe Root and Owen Morgan and their teammates. But I personally believe that we're headed in the right direction. We're all very committed to closing that gap. It doesn't happen overnight. I don't think you go from, only having your first ever female professional player, let's say it was Charlotte Edwards in 2014. I don't think you go to the year 2020 and you have equal pay. I also believe we have a responsibility if we've got X amount of £1 million to spend in the women's game. I personally think it would be neglectful to spend all of that on salaries. We've got a huge obligation to grow the game, to make clubs better, to make the school offer better, to make our talent system generally better. And I don't think that pumping millions of pounds just into saying that Heather Knight will be paid the same as Owen Morgan, I don't believe that would be right.
Are you concerned about the disparity, though? I mean, it is a huge gap.
It is a huge gap. It doesn't make great...
it's not going to be the same level.
Yeah.
It's the depth of the gap.
I think when you put it into the context of significantly increased England women's contracts for next year, plus their 100 salaries, plus the fact that there will be a new professional domestic structure for them to play in that they've never had before for 50 over and T20 cricket. We're going to have 60 professional female players next year from 20 this year. I think all of that is good evidence that we're getting some of this right and that we are moving in the right direction. But I take the point that on stark reading there is disparity. But that we will have a lot of players next year earning nearly six figures, or some players going over the six-figure threshold. Mm-hmm. And when we didn't have any professional players 5 years ago, I think that's a good success story, and it will attract talented girls to hopefully pick cricket.
I hope so. Can I just ask, because I think it was you, Mr. Harrison, that said earlier that 30% of income will go to grassroots, television income.
Yes.
Yes. So, taking the point that I've just asked Clare about, the salary, the money going into salaries for women's cricket in the 100, is that 30%, 70% cut the same for women as it is for men?
No, so the 30. I think the number you're referring to is 30% of ECB's income every year will be apportioned to grassroots investment in whether that's programs, whether that's facilities, whether it's other things that we're doing in the grassroots space. So it's more of and that's something that we're signatories to through the voluntary code. And we make that submission every year, which explains exactly how we're accounting for that 30%.
Right. Okay.
So that's overseen by voluntary code.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just want to point on the revenue side for the men's and women's cricket. What is the relative value of women's cricket as a broadcasting product in terms of its commercial value versus men's cricket?
I think it's something that we're still very much investing in. I don't think it's something that has in its own right at the moment we're in the investment stage to enable us to eventually generate substantial commercial income from the women's game. We are not there yet. We haven't. In fairness, we've made huge strides in the 2.5-3 years since we last were in the broadcast rights market. I can tell you from a commercial partnerships perspective, companies are very reluctant to invest unless you have a male and female portfolio to offer.
Sure. I just want to get a sense of what's the as a proportion. If you want to give the actual figures, if you were selling rights to cricket for the England men's team versus the England women's team, what would be the ratio in terms of the commercial value?
It would be minute in comparison, I think at the moment we are in a situation where we're developing strategies to generate more income through the women's games, and that might be different ways of packaging, which enables you to leverage some of the more I guess, valuable in the broadcaster's mindset properties. But we are probably still a couple of years away from generating real value from certainly women's cricket in this respect.
10%, 20%, 5%?
Oh, no, nothing like that. I mean, you're not even in 5% terms.
Okay, thank you. Just listen to the answers on the 100. And Colin Graves, I suppose the question many people are asking is what is the problem the 100 is here to solve? And it sounds like it's kind of cricket for people who currently don't watch cricket.
Yeah, I think Tom touched on it earlier, Chair, is that basically we've got this hardcore of 1.1 million who regularly watch and attend cricket matches. We've got 10-odd million who are followers and supporters. And yet we've got to try and bridge that gap for existing people, families, children, all the rest of it. Something different to attract them to come and watch cricket. What we've got at the present time is not doing that. So it's to encapsulate that new audience, in inverted commas, but at the same time keeping the existing audience happy as well, because they will certainly migrate towards it. So it's creating something new, and that's how we look at it.
What sort of impact assessment has the ECB made of the impact this may have on T20 cricket in particular? Because obviously there could be the 100 could be a great commercial success, but that could mean it takes audiences away from T20. You know, families only got maybe so much money it can spend in a summer taking the children to watch cricket, and what happens if they go to watch the 100 instead of T20?
Yeah, and what we've again the work that we've done demonstrates that there is room in the market for growth. Remember, we've got very small cricket grounds around this country. We've deliberately put the 100 teams based in big urban conurbations with different target markets sitting behind them, so that we're able to widen the audience for cricket. We hope, obviously, cricket fans, county cricket fans, turn up in their droves to the 100. Absolutely hope that and expect that. You know, what people want is brilliant cricket being played by the world's best players at a time when they can see it. And that is what the 100 is going to do. We will assess its success in a number of different ways, and one of those ways is that it does not in any way impact or cannibalise the great work that's been going on through Vitality Blast. That's why you still have 7 home matches next year if you're a county cricket club to look forward to. In the same way, this year you had 7 home matches. So the whole thing is designed to add people, audience, excitement to our annual diet of cricket in this country. And we'll assess the value not just through bums on seats or not just through turnstile receipts or anything like that. This is going to be about the kind of impact that we've seen through the World Cup this summer, the engagement of, we engaged 1 million children through the Cricket World Cup this summer, through activations, through club open days, through school assembly visits and loads of other things, players going down to their local cricket clubs, and all of these, not just the England players, but local players as well. These are the kind of engagements that we can roll out using the 100 as a way of benefiting.
So would it, from what you're saying, it sounds like your expectation of the 100 is that it will grow the audience for cricket. It won't cannibalise the existing audience; it will grow it.
Absolutely.
And in terms of how you benchmark its success, it will be in that
Absolutely.
way.
Mr. Collins, if I could sort of be even more specific and obvious about this, within 4 or 5 years, cricket needs to demonstrate that it has the ability to grow. That is what the Inspiring Generation strategy is all about. That's why we're putting so much investment into not just strategic investments to grow the game around the country, but to make more of our core, to make our grounds, the fan experience at grounds be better, to play our players better. County cricket, there's never been a better time to be a county cricketer. It's never been a better time to be a women's player. There are, at every level, cricket has got an exciting future, but we have to demonstrate that we can grow this game, so that when we're back into whatever happens with media over the next 5 years, and there's a lot of uncertainty around that, we've got to demonstrate that wherever it goes, whether it's, we're looking at the buyers of sport in the future, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, Netflix, whoever it is, that cricket is presenting its case as a sport that has the ability to grow and has the ability to engage new audiences. That is absolutely critical for the future of everything that we care about.
So you don't believe there's any negative financial impact for T20 cricket? That's your assumptions are based on the fact that T20 revenues will stay either as they are or continue to grow as they've been growing.
Well, that is the intention, absolutely, and I think it.
But that's what is that what your figures are based on? That assumption.
Yes.
And presumably the compensation the counties are getting for the 100, that compensates them for any.
Well, we don't position it as compensation.
No. But it will. I suppose it would cover. The issue for the counties will be whether they make as much money as they hope to make, but not that they will lose out as a consequence of the.
It should be supplementary too.
Yeah. Just on the sort of access to cricket sort of point as well. I mean, obviously these new formats are taking a lot of our questions today, but I mean, people do raise concerns about the traditional county championship game, which has become a sort of, almost like a pre-season and end of season competition. I was looking at the Kent fixture list for this season just completed, and I mean there were more county championship matches started on a Monday and a Tuesday than any other day of the week. And Monday is the most popular day to start a county championship match. And I remember when I was a boy, you'd have a county match start. Alternate weeks, you'd be a county championship match would start on a Saturday, followed by a Sunday league game. So cricket was pretty accessible. Cricket was the best days of cricket were being made available to people when they had the most free time. But if you've got a county match starting on a Monday, I mean, really, that is you're aiming that at people who aren't at work. Or school indeed. Could that be looked at within the cricket calendar? I mean, looking at the times of the year when the county championships played, there's not a lot else going on at that moment in time. Do you think that should be looked at, to have more county matches on days when people can go to them?
Yeah, look, and I can assure you, there's an unbelievable amount of work and the county schedule, the domestic county schedule, and mapping that against the international schedule is the most logistically heavy piece of work that we do at the ECB. We've obviously got many decades of experience of doing this and understanding the different profiles of how things can shape up. With respect to the county championship, we've seen that there has been massive engagement with the county championship that does not reflect in attendance actually, but through digital engagement. The ECB also pay for ball-by-ball coverage for local BBC regional radio stations to cover every match, every ball of every match. That's something that continues. So in terms of attendance, I can understand your view that your memories of county championship cricket when you could watch it are precious to you, and I understand that completely.
It's not my nostalgia that I'm sort of praying in aid of. It's just saying, when you look at that, I think if you look at it as a sort of someone looking at the fixture list and saying, when are they playing? A lot of it just doesn't make much sense, because normally, on the whole, sports try to organise their fixtures at times when people are available to see them play, and that's the kind of normal thing. And this reminds what the county cricket fixtures reminds me of is like the horse racing schedule, where you have small courses being made to meet on odd days of the week in order to meet the broadcasting obligations, and therefore, but not on days when people can go and watch them. And in June this year, Kent played 3 county matches. 2 of them started on a Monday and 1 on a Sunday. And that in June, that's sort of, you might think is a reasonably peak time of the year. Children are playing it at school. The weather's getting better, and you think, well, surely we could do a bit better than that.
I think there's 2 things, Chairman, to try and answer your question there. Firstly, this year was a very odd exception with the World Cup year. Yeah. So it was very, very difficult fitting all schedules in to fit the World Cup in around everything else that we were doing in English cricket. So that was number one, why this year was different. Next year, from 2020 onwards, the schedule has been put together by the stakeholders, by the counties. They actually got together between them. We didn't impose anything on them. We said, go away, and you come back with a schedule that you want to have running the game of cricket, which is what you do. So the schedule for 2020 is what the counties put together themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. Ian Lucas, do you want to come in on county cricket in general?
Interestingly, Damien was talking about watching county cricket in his schoolboy days. I was brought up in County Durham, and I'm so old that it was before Durham was admitted to the county championship, and obviously there was an issue a few years ago now, concerning Durham and their relegation, and there was a parliamentary debate about that took place there. One of the things that I was concerned about when I read about that was that there was reference to ECB regulations and in particular the financial regulations and the deduction of points. And at that time, and I know you've had governance changes, which is why I'm asking this question, you said to my colleague Kevin Jones, the MP for Durham North, "We do not currently publish the ECB regulations governing points deductions, but we are reviewing that in the light of this case." Do you now publish the ECB regulations concerning points deductions?
Publish, I don't think we publish them to the outside world. It is in the handbook for all the counties and stakeholders, so they are fully aware of the regulations that govern professional cricket at county level. If anyone wanted to get hold of those,
I think
are they available?
They are on our website. I think they are on our website. Because clearly
so they are now available. I mean, I'm astonished that they weren't available. I mean, they're not a state secret, are they?
There's no secret. No doubt about it.
So why weren't they available in 2016?
To be honest, I can't answer that question. At this
point,
point,
I think Mr. Jones asked for the regulations and they weren't available. Well, I quoted I think it was a letter from you, Mr. Harrison. We do not currently publish the ECB regulations concerning governing points deductions. Anyway, I would only say, as someone who was brought up in County Durham, that I'm a bit fed up that the 100 is limited to cities in the way that you've described. If you're talking about spreading the game, it seems a very odd thing to narrow it in that way.
Well, it isn't being narrowed. It's the 100 is being played across every county ground in the country. You won't be able to see men's games necessarily at Durham, but you will be able to see women's games. We are very clear in our ambition to take the game as far and wide as possible in this country. That's what the whole strategy is based on, giving more and more communities access to cricket wherever we can. But we're passionate about that in the North East, which is why we took such obviously the issues that Durham faced back 3 years ago, in and around that time. The main driver for ECB was to ensure that cricket had a long-term strategic future in the northeast of England, and that was the critical driver behind our decision-making, which is obviously a very difficult time for Durham and a very difficult time for the ECB as well, getting to that point. But they're in a very, very good place now.
So why have you taken tests away from them? Men's tests?
Well,
if I can answer that one basically. Situation with Durham is well documented, so I don't want to go through all that. But part of the situation which helped drive Durham into its financial predicament was they struggled to sell test match tickets, apart from the Ashes. Everybody can sell Ashes tickets. But they were allocated a number of test matches in May against the second-rate teams coming over, and they struggled on an ongoing basis to sell test match tickets. And that, in fact, pushed them further into financial predicament rather than helping them. And part of the arrangement with the agreement we ended up with Durham was they would not be a test match ground going forward. There would be a one-day international ground, because it's essential that we do have international cricket up there, but certainly not from a test point of view.
Mr. Lucas, if I could just add to that. So one of the things that the UK is the global poster child for Test cricket. We are, in this country, we pride ourselves on the message we send around the world about where the health of Test cricket is. And it's crucially important that as a result, as we move from a situation where we're going to 6 Test matches a summer, from 7 where we've been for the last few years, we're going to 6 Test matches. Those Test matches need to continue to drive the message that the UK is the leading host of Test match cricket, and we and our fans turn up in their droves to watch and celebrate Test cricket, which is we're very proud that that's the case.
Thank you. Thank you. Julian Rose.
Just finally, just following on from Ian there, we have cricket season that's only a few months in duration. The weather's normally awful for most of it. We've got 50 over games, Test matches. In fact, the Test matches also mean that teams like Lancashire only had to play their 2020 match quarter-final away from home, didn't they? You've got 20 over competition, you've got county championships, you've got the 100 now. The truth of the matter, you've got too many counties, you've got too many stakeholders. Is that the case?
Not at all. I think it's we're in a situation where we believe that cricket in this country can grow from where we are. The environment is as healthy as it's been for cricket at any time. We are working very hard.
But you wouldn't design. Sorry to cut across you, Mr. Harris, but you wouldn't actually design what you've got now if you started out, would you? If you were literally a blank piece of paper, you thought, right, I'm going to do a cricket season. I'm going to do. I think you've just changed the first and the second division, the makeup of that, haven't you, in the county championship?
Yes, it's 10 and 8. Yeah.
So you've just changed that. You wouldn't actually design this. I mean, it's a complete hodgepodge, isn't it?
It is. We are very lucky to have a national network of first-class counties and national counties that do an incredible job at developing players and developing massive interest across the country for cricket. We're very fortunate to have that. It is our privilege to ensure that that network remains as healthy as it could possibly be. And we're very pleased to be able, to sit here today in a situation where, the 2 trophies that you see alongside you have been delivered by that network. That is the fact. The players are created by the counties, and we are sitting here with 5 years of financial stability ahead for all of our stakeholders, and a plan to grow the game. So I think it's a thing to celebrate, not to be concerned about.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you think the idea of 18 first-class professional counties is a model that is going to be sustainable? The counties will still be there, but do you think the idea of county cricket as we've known it is going to be sustainable?
If I can answer that one, Chairman, which is a good question, and a lot of people have been asking that question over the years. I remember people saying that 20 years ago. But I think the main thing from our point of view, and we've decided this as a board, that going back to the stakeholders, we have 41 stakeholders. And those stakeholders are treated exactly the same. And the big thing that when I took over, we certainly had counties who were in financial situations where some of them could have disappeared off the face of the cricketing world. We work with them to make sure that they have a role to play within the English game structure. And we're committed to that. And as Tom said, we've now got stability for the next 5 years until 2024. And there's a role for all those counties to play. Some are big, some are small, they're all different. But they are all part of the cricketing family.
Do you think there should be, cricket should be a pyramid like football, where there's, rather than having closed leagues, you've got promotion and relegation all the way up and down the pyramid?
Again, a good question how they're asked over the years. We are where we are, and again it comes back to those 41 stakeholders where you've got 18 professional counties at the top. And then you've got the cricket boards and the minor counties, or should I say national counties now underneath. Whether we join that together, it will be a debate. Is there a way to do that? Do they want to be part of a professional game? When you look at some of the financial issues that goes with that professional game. So I think it's a debate that will be ongoing with the stakeholders. Yeah,
because you think, even using rugby, for example, you look at the success of Exeter. Not a club that was traditionally a big club 20, 30 years ago, but has now had a huge success and can make its way up through the pyramid. And if you want to grow cricket in different parts of the country, in different communities, then one of the consequences that could be that new teams could emerge.
I think there's one big difference, Chairman, between cricket and certainly football and rugby, is that in cricket, I come back to the majority are members' clubs. We do not have very rich, influential owners of professional cricket, and I think that would be a mistake to go down that road. I think cricket survived and dodges and weaves and ducks because we are members clubs and we can do that. But we haven't got the massive financial clout of independent people coming in and putting millions and millions into 1 or 2 or 4, 5 counties at the expense of the others. Yeah. And that's why I think we've got what we've got and it works.
Yeah. Thank you. Giles Watling.
Yes, following moving on from that, I'd just like to ask you, is the ethos of cricket, by its very nature, reserved and resistant to change? Is that one of the problems you're having to deal with, of the fans, the players?
When you say, is it resistant to change, I think over the last hour, we've tried to explain that we are changing cricket, and cricket is adaptable. Cricket can change. It's proved itself over the years.
But are you meeting resistance?
You get resistance because nobody likes change. That's fact. And I said there's nobody more than me as a cricket stalwart who played league cricket for 40 years up in Yorkshire, with everything that goes with what's around Yorkshire from a cricket mentality point of view. So I understand where they're coming from. But they can't sit in the past and tradition and everything else. Yes, we've got to respect it, but the game has got to move on. Yes, people are resistant to it. People don't like change. But even as an oldie like I am, I accept it has got to change.
Yeah, but you're not imposing on people, you're bringing people with you.
No, I'll come back to where I started today. Everything we have done has been in consultation with our members, with our counties, with our players, with everybody else. We have 80,000 members from our professional counties. They have been talked to over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, by the chairman and the chief exec of those counties. Nothing has been imposed. We have talked to them, we've explained the rationale behind it, why we believe it's right, from a board perspective point of view, from an exec point of view, and it's been put across them. They've had the vote at the end of the day. If they wanted to vote it down, they could have voted it down. They didn't.
Right, thank you very much. That was not a question I was going to ask you, but it was just following on from the chairman's comments. What I really wanted to talk about, and I suppose this goes to you, Clare, because I want to talk about, and I'm very excited about what's happening with girls and women's cricket. And I start off by saying, 16 years ago, my twin girls went to school, and the great toppers, Don Topley, was there running the cricket. And the first thing I said was, you're going to get my girls involved, and it wasn't even a consideration. And I was shocked 16 years ago that it wasn't even a consideration, and therefore they did not have cricket in their senior school. Again, I come back to my point that I made earlier. Is this a resistance you're finding in schools? When you're trying to get into schools, into the education system, is there a resistance to girls and cricket?
No, I think we're seeing a lot more openness to it as an option. I think if there is resistance, it's because of time, a sense that it's complicated to coach, a sense that maybe we haven't got enough facilities or kit, a sense that it's played with a hard ball and it'll be dangerous. So we have to change, we have to change those kind of beliefs, which is you can play in a small area, you don't need expert level 3 coaches, you need real champions and kind of real activators to make things happen. You can play with a soft ball, it can be quick, it can be very fun and sociable. So I think if we do get resistance, it's around those things. But we are seeing a huge number of schools turning away from rounders to choose cricket, which is obviously very heartening for us.
Right. And on a practical level, what are you doing to get into those establishments?
Into schools?
Yeah.
Well, we're developing a whole new school strategy over the next 5 years that will target primary schools and secondary schools and private schools, so we'll have different approaches for those. We'll be continuing to work with Chance to Shine. We use several of our England players to go and do player appearances in schools to try to be role models and to show girls that they can have a future in the sport, or that they can, there is a pathway for them. The investment that we're making through Inspiring Generations, the 20 million, a large amount of that will be going into secondary schools and clubs, but a huge amount will also be going into county age group talent programmes. So historically, we haven't invested anywhere near as much as you would expect. You will expect this to be the case. We haven't invested as much in recruiting and supporting talented girls as we have talented boys. And we're going to be making a real step change in that area across all of our counties, first class and national counties. And I think that visibility of a talent pathway is really important for teachers to see it, to be able to connect to it, to be able to understand the rationale for playing cricket in their schools, that there is somewhere for those girls to go and to be supported as talented athletes.
Now, what more can we do as government, as parliamentarians, to help you in that process?
That's a good question. I think we've covered a little bit already about certainly in the state schools is increasing the focus on sport generally. We know the huge benefits that team sports can bring to children's mental, emotional and physical health. We know what cricket as a team sport can do more widely for integration and for all of those very good can generate very good societal benefits. And I think having your advocacy and support in why team sport matters, and particularly why it matters for girls. We know that girls have a fear when they enter their teenage years of playing sport. They haven't been made generally to feel as welcome in sport. They haven't seen a future for them in the game, and that's now starting. And it teaches them, as we know it, we know that girls feel more judged if they're not deemed as traditionally sporty, and that fear of judgment can put a lot of girls off. So I think that there is a lot to do, and I think working in partnership we would really, really appreciate that.
But would you think that the disparity at the top level of pay, as referred to, that might be not helping?
No, I think the opposite to that, and I think that now women can earn. 10 years ago you couldn't earn a living as a woman in a team sport. Now you can. That's a huge positive, and we should all jointly celebrate that and show that the direction of travel that we're on is a really healthy one. Good.
So, okay, moving on to... you've launched the new action plan, women's and girls' cricket, but and that's very welcome, but it's been 2 years since the Cup was brought home. Do you feel you didn't move quickly enough on this?
I've been asked this a couple of times. I think you can always ask, why didn't you do something sooner? And I think, a few things happened around after the World Cup, around the broadcast deal, the level of investment that we knew was going to be at our disposal or to our advantage. And we had a huge case for change piece of work to do. You talk about the change question a couple of questions ago. We did have to do quite a big piece of work, consultative work with all of our stakeholders as to why there was a really important case for change here, and that cricket clubs, whether that be recreational clubs or professional clubs, their previous existence had really been in the main about looking after men and boys playing the game.
Did you not see in advance that winning the Women's World Cup was going to be a big movement for you too?
Yeah, we did, but it wasn't until around that time that we knew exactly what investment we were going to have, and that we would have a strategy that was starting to take shape at that time, and that we had the buy-in from everybody across the organisation and the game and the board to make women's and girls' cricket one of 6 key priorities. So I do appreciate your question, shouldn't we have been set up a little sooner? But I think, it takes quite a lot of organisational change to deliver what we want to deliver, and we're not going to deliver it from Lords or from one of our other regional offices. This is going to be a huge local network of people, new club development officers, new strategies with teachers, new investment into female coaches. How do we make female coaches more visible? And that's taken us a lot of time to do that work. It has been a good couple of years in the making.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Watling, if I could just add to that,
please,
if you don't mind. I think the other thing is we were coming to the end of a strategic cycle right now, actually. So as we move in, we actually launched this strategy January this year, and the kind of consultation that strategy took is immense. Hundreds of meetings and enormous with all of our stakeholders to make sure everyone is comfortable with where we're going. It's difficult to summarise how different the Transform Women and Girls pillar is from where we have been. It is a complete transformation, and embedding that kind of mindset shift as much as anything else. And it comes along with unconscious bias training and all the kind of shifts in mentality through administration as much through the playing ranks. That is a massive piece of work, and I genuinely think it would have looked very odd if it hadn't been launched as part of a wider strategy for the game, because it is our single biggest opportunity for growth.
So going back to my original point, you feel you're winning that point when my girls went to school and it wasn't even a consideration. You're beginning to get there.
I think we are. I too have that same challenge with 2 girls who now think cricket is something they are desperate to play, and they do.
Thank you for that. It's just that this new strategy is being launched in 8 regional centres. Is that right?
Yes.
At the elite level.
At the elite level.
But every county will play a role within club development and county age group talent pathways. The 8 regional model is around our new elite domestic structure.
So you
it's
will
8
be reaching
teams.
out to the grassroots around as well?
Oh yeah, as I said earlier, half of the money is going into grassroots, into facilities, secondary schools and club development officers to support clubs to become more sustainable. Yeah. I mentioned earlier we've seen growth in women's and girls club cricket, 10 to 15% every year since 2015, but we've also seen churn. So for every 30 sections that start up, 15-fold. And we now understand what those reasons are. And so we'll be deploying a network of club development officers to support clubs on becoming more sustainable for women and girls. So the counties and the recreational game have got a huge role to play across growing the base and in local county age group talent programmes. The 8 regional model is very much around our 8 senior team structure and our 8 academies from a talent perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive.
Just following on from that, how is grassroots development funded? What's the sources of the money? Is it just the ECB, or do you get money from Sport England? Or
we get so we have got some government funding. We've been given 1.2 million to train up 2,000 female coaches, particularly for disadvantaged communities, which is something we're very grateful for. The county boards sometimes get money from local councils and local government, but I don't think there's any central government Sport England funding now. Previously, Chance to Shine received Sport England funding. That's not the case anymore, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. And so, what is success for cricket going forwards? I mean, we've got these marvellous, trophies here, which are, it is wonderful to see them. But we have got declining participation figures, and you also have this problem that in the national team, 43% of the male team went to independent schools, and 35% of the women's team went to independent schools. So how would that compare, say, back over the last decade? How has that changed? Do you want to take this?
Happy to, yeah. I think those numbers are, Ms. Drefford, concerning. We acknowledge them. They've probably remained pretty consistent over the last decade. The reason that number is so high in the women's game is that lots of those young women went to essentially private schools on cricket scholarships and played with boys. Natalie Siver would be an example of that. I think that's exactly why we're laying out our plans as we have. We need cricket to be more accessible, and our markers of success will be around engagement with schools, clubs, and participation rates. So we do acknowledge it. It's where the game's been, and we've got to change that.
So is one of the problems here that the game is made more accessible in independent schools, so therefore a higher proportion of people there play it? And with the decline of free-to-air coverage of cricket, that you're almost bound not to reduce that figure, because access to cricket is so limited now, either through TV coverage or participation in non-independent schools. Isn't your strategy making this worse?
I think our strategy is trying to address that point by saying we want to bring down the barriers, and one of the key pillars of the strategy is making cricket more accessible, whether that's through access through digital, whether it's through developing a new competition, which we talked about, whether it's through a complete relaunch of our strategy for giving kids access to cricket at the earliest stage of their career. We've launched All Stars Cricket, which is the 5 to 8 year olds entry-level programme, which has been very successful, and it's going into its 4th year. We're about to launch the next stage of that, which is being supported by relationships with media companies now that are not transactional, they are strategic partnerships. And I think our partnerships are very real in wanting to leave a positive legacy for the investments that they make. So, for example, when we talk about making cricket accessible and we talk about going back onto the BBC, and it's not just about linear channels and being on BBC Two on Thursday nights and Saturday nights, it's about the One Show, it's about CBeebies, it's about the BBC Asian network, it's about being on radio, it's about Test Match Special going into its seventh decade of partnership with English cricket. It's about the enormous digital engagement that the BBC brings us, and all of our social channels do. When we won the World Cup, the Men's World Cup I should say, it was the biggest story the BBC website had ever carried, ever. Not just sports story, any story. You know, the game is massive, and if the World Cup taught us anything, Men's World Cup, if the Men's World Cup taught us anything, it is that the game is enormous in this country, and we've got an enormous amount to tap into with these accessibility strategies that will help us address the very issue you're highlighting.
Can I just ask one quick question about the grassroots again, and that is cooperation with other sports.
Yeah.
In order to get economies of scale when you're going into schools, you know, do you cooperate with rugby, football, tennis, and other sports?
Yes, we do, and actually there's a live conversation going on at the moment with the Premier League around how we engage and make it easy for teachers to teach cricket, teach activity really, as opposed to the complexities of football or cricket, but partner with organisations that can help us deliver scale and help us with this significant challenge of getting into the national curriculum and getting into the mindset of teachers thinking that cricket's not a complicated sport to teach. It's about running around with a bat and ball.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Ahead of the 2017 Women's World Cup, we set up a three-way national governing body group with cricket, netball and hockey, knowing that we had the amazing privilege of 3 consecutive home World Cups in those sports. And I think that's something we need to do even more of. I think your point there around economies of scale and what is best practice and how can we learn from other sports around what does make that relationship with the teaching community, and how do we make it easier with online teaching resources for lots of the basic skills that are across all sports. And I think there were some really good learnings from that 3-way national governing body group, and I think we should continue to build on those ways of working.
So when we're investing in facilities, do we get it right? Do we design some sports out? I mean, I can recall when I was involved with developing an all-weather pitch in my constituency, where we partnered with hockey, who never struck a ball on the pitch after it was all done, but this was the deal we had to do with football. But do we, when we do that sort of thing, do we freeze out other sports? Are we thinking enough about how we bring all sports together and make sure the facilities are accessible when we spend a lot of money on them?
Mr. Effer, I think we're really good at this actually in sport. I think our facilities team is based in Manchester, and they do an unbelievable job in accessing local community heads to ensure that and sources of funding to make sure that every pound that we spend, and the kind of ratio that we use is every pound that we commit to facilities funding goes into £3 of funding for that particular facility. So either match funding from local councils, we do a lot of work with the Football Foundation, for example. These kind of things, the Marathon Trust, the London Marathon Trust, and all these different sources of revenue are really, really important ones for cricket to leverage. I think we're really good at that particular thing. I will say, however, that the average age of a cricket pavilion in this country is now around 52 years old, and we could have 10 times the amount of funding into facilities, and it's not enough for what we need to do.
Well, talking about sources of funding, so how much do you get back into the sport from gambling?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Efford. I think it's probably the only part of industry that doesn't commit any funding to cricket at all. Everyone else who has a relationship with us, whether you're a fan, a ticket buyer, you want to buy a bit of merchandise, or you're a broadcast partner, or you're a licensee or an official partner, they're all committing. They're all partnering with cricket and paying for that right. I can't say the same for the betting industry.
So they profit from what are basically your intellectual property rights, your fixtures.
Yes, we estimate that UK betting, the amount of money bet on cricket in the UK is around £713 million.
That's the figure I've got. You've got the Gambling Commission figure.
That's right.
For 2017-18. Yeah. And so, do you have any dialogue with the government about saying to them, look, the gambling industry is acting unreasonably. They will not invest anything back into grassroots sport. Why don't you place a levy on them? Have you ever had those discussions with them?
We've mentioned it softly at kind of to Sports Minister a few years ago, and it was something that was raised in the Sports Business Council that was briefly in existence. But I would support anything that we could do to enable us to put that message through, that we would very much, we put massive steps in place to ensure that betting on cricket does not impact us from an integrity perspective. That is something that we spend an unbelievable amount of time thinking about. Our fans have to believe what they see is real, and if you don't have that, then literally you don't have a sport. And we spend an awful lot of money on our anti-corruption and integrity departments, but quite beyond that, in my opinion, these businesses who profit from cricket should be investing in the development of the very thing they profit from, and that is development of players, grassroots, all of that.
You haven't got any idea of a figure of how they profited from the World Cup, have you?
No, I wouldn't have that figure because we don't have those direct relationships with the industry that would enable us to get access to that figure.
Right. Can I just move on to your finances? Because you've had a dramatic drop in your reserves over the last 3 years. So you have an operating deficit, according to figures that we've seen, of 23 million. Yet you've got these plans to commit 450 million of direct funding to the network of county cricket clubs during a 5-year period. This includes improvements in club facilities and infrastructure and constitutes 60% increase on the current direct funding levels. So how's all that going to add up then?
Well, it's clearly a strategy. It's clearly something that's designed to create sustainability into the network and build robust businesses for our counties as much as anything else. In terms of the reserve levels, I'm sure Colin will go into it in a second, but we've also had some, there's been a very, our revenues are looked at really in 4-year cycles. The thing that's been really different about the last 4 years as to the previous 4 years and the previous 4 years to that has been the change in the value being extracted from the Indian market in respect of broadcast rights, which up until around 2014-15, the value of Test cricket in the Indian market was very different to what it is now, and that's really what you're seeing come to light there is the impact of IPL and a T20, a very discerning T20 audience in India. That has had an impact on the way in which that audience regards Test cricket globally. Every single board has kind of seen that decline in Indian broadcast revenue, but it's one of the reasons why our reserves are down, and Colin will go into the principal reason.
I can just explain basically, as Tom said, our reserves have always gone in a 4-year cycle where you get money at the start of the cycle and then it drifts down over a period by the expenditure and everything we need to do. So it was always planned that our reserves would drop over that 4-year cycle. Going forward for the new next year 5-year cycle, our reserves, which has been done through our audit committee, chairman of audit and our FD, will build up to somewhere in the region of £65 million. And that is with a new income coming in from the new broadcasting.
So you anticipate that the current deficit will be turned around, and is that as a consequence of 100?
It's a combination of everything. It's the total new broadcasting deal, including the 100, including the international, everything. And
that is. You anticipate that the income being sufficient not only to create that turnaround, but also the levels of expenditure
yes.
that you're planning. You're confident on that.
Yes.
Okay, can I just move on just quickly then to your new governance arrangements that you brought in 2017? Do you think that they give a voice to the entire cricket community? Do you think counties and others have a voice through that?
Yeah. I think it's important to recognise how much work has been done over the last 2 to 3 years. We had 3 external reviews and, as Colin mentioned earlier, a long internal review that resulted in around 72 recommendations, 70% of which are done and 30% will be done in this next year. Besides having a governance structure that it surpasses the Sport England Code of Practice, we, as I mentioned earlier, we consistently engage with our first-class county chairman, with our national counties, and we also have now established a professional game group where the first-class counties will be regularly discussing with us issues that arise with them. So there's a constant engagement and consultation process. But at the board level, hopefully we're extremely transparent. We're focused on our delivery of inspiring generations. We're financially astute with it, ensuring the figures that Colin mentioned earlier are made. And we have very clear, honest, transparent rules, procedures and systems that have developed very clearly in the last 2 years.
So if the counties and other parts of the sport were sitting here, they would agree with that, would they?
They actually voted for it. I mean, we had a vote at the end of the day in terms of the structure of the new board, and that was voted on by the counties. Like Colin said, we couldn't alter anything that the counties don't agree to.
If I can clarify as well, Mr. Everett, the question you've asked there. Having sat on the other side of the fence as a county chairman for a number of years, I can assure you now and over the last 3.5 years, there has been more communication, more consultation, more discussion with the county chairman, the chief exec, than ever before in the history of the ECB. That is fact.
And as part of the new management structure, you introduced 4 non-executive directors that don't have anything to do with cricket. They have no history or past with cricket. What was the purpose of that? What were you seeking to achieve when you did it?
It's a diversity of skills on the board. So we have, phenomenal talent in terms of media, finance, diversity and inclusion, commercial activity, acumen. So I'm one of those people who don't have a connection with cricket, but I love cricket with a passion. I've played since I could walk. So I mean, there's that element of it, but I bring something else to the board besides a cricket history.
And the Good Governance Institute called for you to introduce a board code of conduct alongside a programme of board professional development.
Yes.
How is that?
And that's been completed. We have a board induction for every new non-exec director that comes. We have a director's handbook. We have ongoing reviews and appraisals, and we're hoping we'll take something akin to that out to the counties as well, and help them develop their code of conduct as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And can I just ask one quick question on the secondary ticketing, because it's a particular bugbear on mine. How much do you think that secondary ticketing costs the sport?
I don't have those numbers, Mr.
But
there would be a massive amount.
Substantial.
Yeah.
And
out of fans' pockets.
And I mean, is there anything you answered the question earlier on about what rules could be brought in or what regulations could be brought in to restrict it further? But is there any more that you can do to protect the fans? Because I mean, I've just been through this where my family have been buying tickets for Glastonbury, and you've got to register before you can't just rock up and be a botnet. You've got to have a photograph, you've got to register before you could even bid for the tickets. And then when you turn up, your photograph is on your ticket. Is there more that can be done even within the regulations now to I don't think you'll ever stop it completely, but minimise this secondary ticketing market that is absolutely ripping off fans?
Yeah, I'm sure there is more we can do, Mr. Efford. I mean, we work very closely with our first-class counties on all matters of ticketing. we don't sell the vast majority of tickets to fans directly. The ECB don't necessarily get involved in that process. Actually, ironically, we do when it's an ICC-owned tournament, but we don't for England or obviously county events. And in the 100, we have an arrangement with counties where that will be a relationship that is closer than it's ever been. So the opportunity for developing a better way of ensuring fans are protected is there for us now. So we will certainly take steps to ensure that we do as much as we can to protect fans. It's a big problem for us.
But I've heard that for years. We'll do our best, and it still goes on. I mean, are there any concrete proposals to make any changes to how you sell tickets that would protect fans from this?
It's not something that's come to our board, and it's not something that we've discussed in detail. But I will take it from this meeting and definitely raise it with counties and come back to you and write to you with steps that we're prepared to take to protect fans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of final questions from me for this panel. I just wanted to be clear on this, with the 100, was the decision on where the teams would be based, was that taken by the ECB? Was there a bidding process? Could people put in offers to demonstrate how they could meet the criteria for being a host city, if you like?
Yes, absolutely. There was a full process of bidding for the effectively the rights to stage to host a team. And for those effectively licences to be made available for a period of time, which is 5 years. So that process was dealt with through an independent panel that looked at the submissions, and then we took it through the 100 board, which is the official subcommittee of the board, and then to the ECB board for final decision.
Would those criteria, though, have made it practically impossible for anyone that wasn't one of the test venue grounds or either current or previous to bid?
No, anyone was welcome to bid, absolutely. Anybody at all could bid. I think we were very clear about the criteria that we wanted to introduce, which was the concept of developing a wider audience, which would have definitely meant that if you were in a large conurbation around the country, it would have been an advantage. That wasn't to say that it was impossible for other grounds to be successful, but it was designed specifically around engaging with new communities around the country and to enable us to get the kind of impact that we've had through the Cricket World Cup on a more regular basis.
But was it were there criteria around experience of hosting major cricket matches as part of it? Because I could think of, you might have cities that have got sports venues that could be adapted to host cricket but haven't done it before. Yes,
I think all of our grounds are pretty experienced in hosting.
This wasn't the question I asked. It was just sort of if a bidder had come forward and said, well, we meet a lot of the criteria, but this isn't a test ground.
I see.
But we can actually create a venue of the size and quality required.
As in build a completely new venue, for example,
or extend or adapt an existing cricket facility to make it a larger one to deal with a bigger audience. Were options like that considered possible, or was it?
Yes, although I think what we were trying not to do through this process is impose huge costs on a ground's ability to get itself into the kind of shape for hosting men's 100 ball games. I will just say that every ground will be hosting 100 events. You're I think referring to the men's events, but It was a process that was pretty clear about what we were trying to achieve. I don't think it was in any way counting against counties that was discriminating against counties in any way. I really don't think that was the case.
I suppose I was interested in what were the realistic possibilities of a range of different bids coming in from that could be seriously considered, or was this always going to be a format that rested largely on the cities that are used to hosting big cricket matches and have got test grounds to host them?
I think the drivers behind why we wanted to develop a new competition were about developing a tournament that could get into this 10.5 million fans. So having a sense of where those fans were, and we obviously had a sense through demographic profiling. We did a lot of catchment area research to understand how far fans travel when they buy tickets and what they're prepared to, nights of the week where they're prepared to travel, nights of the week where they're not. That kind of detailed information went into the submissions to enable us to make the right decisions about where these teams should be based, because clearly availability of getting to grounds is an important part of this, and that obviously puts the larger cities in the country in an advantageous position.
What's your view on the travel time?
Well, it changes dramatically based on night of the week, based on opposition, and based on distance from ground. So, you might find a fan in and around Leeds would be prepared to travel further to watch a Roses match than they would against another rival around, because of that local derby environment. So that's the kind of detailed information that we looked at and that we have and we look at regularly.
But sorry, I'm not really clear on what you said. That's a criteria. So I'm just interested in what those criteria apply. Do you say that actually for a match like this, we don't think people will travel more than an hour or 2 hours, or?
Yeah, I think I'll have to get back to you on the exact level that we thought. But I think if you're travelling over an hour to a game where the entire game lasts 2.5 hours, that might have, I'll come back to you on the exact detail behind that.
Yeah.
That's
because I understand there was a time years ago where people talked about whether the Olympic Stadium could be used to host cricket games, for example, in the summer period, which would be it's not a cricket venue, but it could be adapted to do. There are other urban grounds.
If I can tell you, Chairman, we actually looked at using the Olympic Stadium for the World Cup, and there were so many issues by changing it into a cricket ground, and the cost of doing it is started at £1 million plus. So there was a lot of negativity once we looked at that, because we saw that as an opportunity. But from a practical point of view, it just didn't stack up.
Okay, so but what you're saying is you were prepared to think laterally about where these games could be held.
And that's what we did.
And do you see now the 100 as fixed, in that the teams that have been created, the venues they play at, that will probably be consistent, or could they move around in the future if new opportunities came along?
I think the strong view of the ECB is that this is the start of the 100, and there are opportunities to hopefully, on the back of a successful tournament, building on success of county cricket and the continued success of the Vitality Blast and other short form cricket in the country, we are able to expand it. That would be a significant sign of its success. I think it's highly possible that will be the case in the future.
Expand it in terms of having more teams, you mean?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. But you don't see the teams that have been created moving necessarily from where they're based. They will. Do you see them as building a base where they are, or do you think, like an American football team, they might suddenly decide to move to another part of the country?
I would to be discussed, I think. But,
personally, Chair, from my point of view, I don't see that. I think if you're building 8 teams in 8 regions, the opportunity could be, and it'll always be under review, is do we have 2 more teams in different regions? That I think will be the discussion that happens as and when appropriate.
So you'd see it sort of over time, these new teams would start to build a relationship with the communities that they largely serve, and will be a fixture.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just one final question I thought we should ask to Colin Grace, because I know it's something that has been reported quite a lot during your time as chairman, and that was obviously. You mentioned earlier on you were chairman of Yorkshire previously, and a number of people have reported your family trust connection, ongoing connection with Yorkshire, and your role as chair of the ECB. I wonder if you could just state for the record of the committee just how you sort of manage what could be a perceived conflict of interest, and how the board have helped you with that.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. From my point of view, yes, my family trust virtually has a financial loan arrangement with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. That is managed by a set of professional trustees. I have nothing to do with that whatsoever, not one bit. I declared that before I even took up chairmanship of the ECB. So I have no financial involvement personally with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. So any conflict that's either appeared to have arisen at any time, I've always excused myself from those discussions. And Camlish has chaired the board when it's come to match allocations, all those kind of things. So I made sure that I was well out of any situation where people could say I had a conflict of interest.
Yeah. So that's Lord Patel. So on decisions, any decision the board has taken which may have had a financial impact on Yorkshire Cricket Club has been a decision that's been taken without Mr. Gray's participation.
Yeah. And in terms of the information we have, the chairman doesn't need to exclude himself, actually, in terms of actually, but he has done every time.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a sort of sense? I mean, it's one of those dilemmas. Thinking of future chairs of the ECB, having someone who's been chair of a county might be seen as a good thing in terms of experience, but nevertheless will always bring some allegation that that person has an inherent interest in the county that they used to serve. I mean, do you feel the ECB's got a good structure in place now with the new board to make sure that whatever the background of the new chair, any issues like this can be managed successfully?
I think it will be. We have a nominations committee. We have a good process. It's a transparent process from recruiting from the wider world, and of course you want people with cricket knowledge as well as the business acumen to run a very complex organisation, as Colin's described. And I think we have the governance structures in place to cope with somebody with previous county experience or not.
Yeah. And just finally, just to go back to something I touched on at the beginning. Do you think the cricket board, you might develop a role similar to what football has done, where you have a representative from the professional first class game, and you have a representative from who represents minor leagues and community cricket as sort of fixtures on the board? Because I do think it does look a bit odd that none of the first class counties have a direct voice on the board.
I'll start off with that, and then I'm sure Camillus has got his view. Again, coming back to having sat on both sides of the fence as chairman of a county and where we are now, I believe that certainly the input from whether you're a county board, whether from a professional county cricket club, is better than it's ever been. So that connection is better than it's ever been. And I think if anybody says it's not, then quite honestly, I would disagree with that. Yeah. Having been part of it, of the way we communicate, the way we liaise, the meetings we have, it is fantastic. And a lot of people have said that to me within the game.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that concludes the questions from the committee for this panel. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for bringing the World Cups, and congratulations on behalf of the committee for the success of the England team this summer.
Thank you very much, Chair, for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Are we on? We're on. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the second panel. I just thought I would just say something about something that happened during the first panel session. There were a couple of people, the gentleman there's one of them, who were wearing T-shirts with slogans on that were related to the evidence session, and they were asked to cover those slogans. That is unfortunately that is the rule of Parliament. It covers all parliamentary proceedings, and it also includes members as well. So that no one can have a T-shirt with a slogan or hold a banner or have a sticker on that is advocating something. It's just a general rule that's applied. So it was I wouldn't be seen as a discourtesy to people in the room. It's just a general rule that has to be applied at all hearings. But I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you for joining us, and we covered a very wide range of issues in the first session. I think you were all in the room for at least part of it, and I'm sure we'll cover a similar range of topics now. I wanted to start off looking at grassroots cricket, which is something that we touched on. The committee did an inquiry last year, which we published earlier this year, about the social impact of sport. And I remember we went to this was last summer. Went to Kennington Park, which is very, very close to the Oval, and there's a community cricket pitch, which is probably the nearest cricket pitch to the Oval, and it was a bakingly hot summer's day, and we were talking about football, and I think the cricket pitch was largely being used by different football groups to play football on it, and the all-weather wicket in the middle was just, not being used at all, and I thought this was a kind of, is there a generation... Is there a sort of generation that's being lost to cricket, and even facilities that were put in the recent past in urban areas are not being used for the purpose they were designed for, and that people are engaging in other sports. So I'm particularly interested, maybe particularly from Laura and Chris, if you have views about how we engage certainly urban communities in cricket, where there's at the moment not as much cricket as we'd like to see. So, Laura, do you want to go? Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Laura Cordingley. I'm Chief Executive at Chance to Shine. We're a national children's charity, and we use cricket to help change their lives. We work with around 500,000 children a year. Proud to say almost equal split between boys and girls, and we work in state schools and we work in disadvantaged communities. So to answer your question, Chair, around urban cricket and sort of cricket outside of rural areas, our street programme was developed back in 2008 very much to address that gap. Yeah. Where we recognised as a charity there was many young people who were taking part in cricket in schools, but they didn't have the opportunity to then go to a traditional cricket club. There wasn't a welcoming space for them. There wasn't a safe space for them to be able to take part in cricket. So Street was born out of that. Fast forward to today, we have 200 projects around the country. They are funded through Sport England as one of our partners through that programme, and obviously as an independent charity we fundraise to help deliver against that. In terms of participation, they are in the top 30% of disadvantaged areas in the community, and 87% of those participants are from a BA/ME background. In terms of the demographics of that, furthermore, that same percentage of young people do not take part in any physical activity outside of those cricket sessions, so they are self-identifying as being completely inactive outside of school setting. We work really hard to try and make sure that as many young people as possible get the opportunity to take part in cricket outside of school and in the community settings. And through that programme alone, we have around 5,500 young people that take part in cricket on a regular basis. And what I will say about that is it's a year-round programme. So we have photos of children playing cricket in the snow in Newcastle, through to kids playing in all-weather pitches in Portsmouth. So it's free, and that's really important for us. We know 90% of those kids tell us that the fact that it's free is hugely important. The age ranges are age 8 to 16 for our street young programme, and our young adults programme are 16 to 24. And our young adults programme came about because when children were getting to 16, so originally Street took them up to 16, but they see Street as their club. So for them, that is, they go there, they on average attend around 30 sessions a year, 30 hours a year throughout the year, and they wanted to continue participating. As they get older, more competition comes into it, so they take part in more regular leagues against other street teams and other street venues. But we have seen that really, I think, change the face of cricket in a lot of urban areas. I would say that there's a lot of coastal towns in terms of disadvantage that we work in as well in terms of streets, so Portsmouth being one, some of the other sort of more coastal areas of disadvantage. But for us, that is hugely important. And in terms of wider grassroots participation, if you take outside of the work that we do with schools, a huge amount of the work we do is around helping children to progress And for us, progress covers them as an individual and how they develop through the sport. We've got a lot of evidence that shows them developing their personal, social and physical well-being, but also how they progress into community through All-Stars and also into traditional clubs as well.
How do you, I'll come to Chris in a second, but how do you develop a pathway into cricket for people that may engage with cricket through Chance to Shine? So, if going back to the Kennington Park example I used, if you live on the Brandon estate, what is your pathway to playing for Surrey? If you're not at a school that plays a lot of cricket.
Yeah. So we, in terms of our state skill programme, we're in 1 in 4 primary schools. That's not an insignificant number. It helps us reach around 500,000 children a year. Clearly, we would like to do more. It's completely scalable, as is our street programme. We send coaches into schools. It goes back to the point that Clare made earlier. Teachers have a real lack of confidence in terms of delivering cricket. But the approach that we take around how to help them develop the whole child through the sport really helps. We then work with the counties, local clubs and associations to help children progress onto either club cricket, either through All-Stars or street. I guess to give you an example, not far from Surrey, we have the Black Prince Trust site where we have our street programmes. Yeah. And to give you a real live example of how that actually happens, we have a girls project that's also based in Lambeth, and the teachers physically walk the girls with them to that project. And it's there's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of what works for young people. We work with local organisations and local partners to help us to work out exactly what is the best way to help them on their pathway. Yeah. If you take street as an example, out of those children that then take part in street, 315 of those then went on to traditional clubs. Now, as I said, many of those young people see street as their club, but if they want to progress and they want to go on to traditional clubs, the counties that we work with work very hard to help them do that. We're not here about talent, we're here about the difference that we can make to young people, but it's a really nice byproduct when we have those examples. And we do have a handful of examples where young people have gone on to representative county cricket. Middlesex, this springs to mind. We had a girl called Elsa that did really well and went through. Sunny Singh ended up playing for Warwickshire. He started off at a Chance to Shine street session. So it happens. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Can we do more? Certainly. Yeah. That's why we're here as a charity. Yeah.
Just finally, before I move on to Chris, do you have a sense of what you might call cricket not spots in rural areas too? Because there have been concerns about the closure of village cricket clubs for a variety of reasons. My village in Kent, Ealing, has got a very strong cricket club which regularly produces players that play for the county, and the other local clubs, Sifton Park, were in the final of the village competition, national village competition recently. But I can also think of other areas where cricket isn't played very much anymore. Does Chance to Shine look at sort of rural communities as part of this programme as well? Yeah,
absolutely. So you could pretty much drop a pin on a map, and I'm more than happy to share the map that we have with the committee afterwards where we are. But we support 4,500 schools across the country, and we're in absolutely every single county, and we work really hard to make sure that our footprint is spread. Yeah. The reason street exists is because there was those lack of clubs. Where those clubs are, we work really hard. I'm from a Durham mining village, and I know the power of village cricket in terms of what that can do, and quite often they are the only facilities in those communities where kids can go back to. If you're a kid and you're bussed to and from your school and you go back to your village, the village cricket club is that community for them. So we work hard with counties to make sure that where there are club facilities there, children can access them. And I would say All-Stars has been very good at helping us with that, because actually what we do have now is, kids in primary schools, it's tennis ball, it's softball, it's plastic bat. When they go to the club now, they have a similar experience in terms of All-Stars, so it's a real welcoming environment, and we've had some really good feedback from that. But fundamentally, through Chance to Shine, 60% of children A, say they really like the sport, and B, want to continue playing it. If they actually haven't picked up a bat and ball, 1 in 100 of them say they like the game, which is a huge discrepancy. But we know that actually you've got to put a bat and the ball in the hands first. You've got to help them to develop through it, but they've got to have fun first and foremost. Yeah.
Thank you. Chris, perhaps you could we welcome your sort of insights on this, particularly cricket in sort of urban context and your experience with platform cricket.
Yes, okay, so what we do is very similar to that, but obviously in quite a sort of tighter area and perhaps a bit more forensically almost. So we've been working on our particular project, platform cricket, across 3 London boroughs. We do similar things. We work in schools, but we really focus on the transition into moving children outside of school. And really there's sort of two issues which we're trying to address. One is bringing more kids from disadvantaged backgrounds into cricket, and one is bringing kids from more BME backgrounds into cricket. And of course there's a supply and demand issue there. So for a lot of inner London boroughs, across the boroughs that we work in, there's only 3 clubs with youth sections. And we work out that across inner London it's something like 0.06% of the primary school age population could actually move into a cricket club youth section now if they wanted to. So there's a big supply issue. I think by working in a sort of tighter geographical area, what you are able to do as well is get to know the specifics of the community that you're trying to work in, because there's obviously often quite subtle barriers which stop that from occurring. And quite often they're cultural. So our work in Tower Hamlets, for example, it's about kind of setting up stuff around religious practices when kids are going to mosque, to Arabic reading, knowing some of that intelligence. In South London, it's a little bit different. It's being able to work alongside other sports, because at the moment cricket probably isn't the first sport they go to. But I think one of the key things is being able to work at the right age. And for quite a long time, investment in sport has probably come too old to meaningfully get kids involved with sport. I think it looks good as an intervention and a diversionary activity for kids who might be getting into other more social issues, whether that be kind of gang, whether that be kind of radicalisation, even kind of an intervention for health issues that, you know, that the measures are taken at 11-year-old for obesity, for childhood obesity. So to show an impact on that, it's almost too late. A lot of kids who do get the support from home to access cricket are doing so at a much younger age group. And so what we're doing is we're working at kids at that kind of age group, at that kind of 8-9 age group. So there's some parity, you know, there's some equity with kids who are from areas that don't have cricket clubs in them, with kids who either do have cricket clubs in their communities or they have support from home to be able to access it, even if it's not on their doorstep.
I mean, what do you think? You said supply is one of the barriers to entry. Is that sort of lack of community cricket facilities and clubs?
I think the facilities can be a red herring sometimes. I think it's clubs definitely, but I think the important thing that comes with clubs is the volunteer workforce. And I think if you look at volunteering and the fact that people who are degree educated or people who are in professional jobs are much more likely to volunteer, that's where the sort of postcode lottery comes into this. I think what you need to do in more deprived areas is being able to start that off artificially with the professional workforce, but then what gravitates to that, where there's kids who start playing, obviously they come with parents or family members and other community members who might not necessarily be cricket enthusiasts, but they're community champions. They come into that equation, and then there's an opportunity to get them involved in coach education and sort of grow from there.
Do you think role models play an important part in this? I mean, in some ways it touched on some of the questions we had earlier on about, you know, cricket on television. You know, that, you know, I think that lots of children seek to emulate sports stars and what they've achieved. And do you think that's the same in cricket as well?
I do. I think subtly, well, first of all, there's no doubt that kids from a particular background definitely do, you know, it resonates more with them if there's a player from that particular background. Yeah. I think the subtle thing that comes into it as well is this idea about using cricket for other kind of social outcomes. And the sort of integration and the citizenship angle as well. And I think what you get quite often in immigrant families, particularly first-generation immigrant families, is a tendency to watch home language channels, you know. And so cricket, it's often Bangladesh or Pakistan or wherever it might be that there's the cricket that's watched. So I think probably the other thing that adds a little bit of power to the free-to-air thing is that idea about being able to get kids from immigrant families watching England playing and becoming England supporters.
Given where you work in London, is it important, do you think, to have centres like Beckenham where people can actually watch first-class cricket, England junior matches on their doorstep, rather than it being sort of a trip to one of the big test venues in London? I mean, there's less of an issue in other cities around the country because the big cricket grounds are still pretty accessible for people that live in those cities. London's slightly different. I mean, do you think that it helps?
It does. I definitely think there's counties where their centre is out, where they come into an urban area like Kent, where it comes into an urban area, but its centres traditionally outside of that area. They are disadvantaged in terms of being able to access that population. I think it's difficult. I think in terms of, if you look at it purely in terms of population numbers, a smaller county like Northamptonshire, for example, is eclipsed by sort of 2 London boroughs, in terms of its population. So I think centres like Beckenham, which enable Kent to access that population better, are potentially very important. I don't think they're realising that potential yet, but of course it's a relatively new facility. Do you think more needs? I mean,
you clearly you're working a lot as Chancellor Shyness and getting more children to play cricket or start play cricket. Do you think there should be more opportunities for children to watch cricket live as well, particularly ones from more deprived communities or where those opportunities might not exist?
I think it helps. I certainly don't think it overtakes the need to invest in infrastructure, though. I think that the first and foremost thing is being able to invest in infrastructure, but firstly, I mean people. So, as I say, our programme, in terms of the community part of its participation, is based in local parks, and it's easy to start. Then, if you think about some of the countries that England competes with, facilities at grassroots level are very basic, So I think we can cope on that front, and I think what the viewing does, both on the TV and in person, it's once somebody started it pushes them a bit further along that journey. It's about kind of aspiration and about continuing both in age but continuing in talent as well. But I think the very first thing is investing in infrastructure, and I think that the inner cities need that on a much more local level than perhaps when you get into the suburbs and outwards.
Yes.
I would echo that in terms of the free-to-air debate. Clearly, more exposure for children is excellent, but when 1 in 5 children are only as physically active as they need to be, we really concentrate on getting children physically active, getting them to pick up a bat and ball, and making sure that they get access to sport and cricket, and that they can develop through it. It was really interesting the question you asked about role models, because we survey around 2,000 to 3,000 children a year through Chance to Shine, and we asked them who their favourite cricketer was. And we expected them to say Joe Root, Heather Knight, and the answer we got was my Chance to Shine coach from the majority of the children. But for us, that's not a surprise, because that coach is their first role model that shows them a love for the game. And for us, that was so encouraging that actually that is their entry point into the game for them. And we're really delighted in terms of ECB's Inspiring Generation strategy that they want to double the number of young people that are accessing state school cricket, and that as their delivery partner for that through Chance to Shine, they will be significantly increasing their investment in us to help us do that. And for us, that's really powerful, helps us get more kids physically active and helps them to benefit through the sport.
I think your Kennington Park example as well really hits that home. This is a broad stroke, sorry, but in South London, of course, you've got a very Afro-Caribbean population, which for a variety of different reasons, one of which is that it's become a much more African population, which is obviously generally not cricket playing traditionally, compared to West Indian countries. It kind of hits home that you need people on the ground to do that, and particularly in parts of Lewisham and Greenwich that we work in as well, Nepali, Sri Lankan, Eastern European, South American communities. They're not countries and places that have a cricket tradition, so you're really starting from scratch. So to have people on the ground who from start to finish really give the first experience, but are then helping kind of push people through that pathway for the first time. And we see parents all the time, kind of Croatian, Polish, or Italian parents who are going to cricket for the first time with their kids, So yeah, the human workforce and the infrastructure around that is
just a final question from me on this. We heard a lot in the earlier session about how the 100 is seen as an opportunity to engage people in communities that aren't traditional cricket communities. Have the ECB had any conversations with your organisations about how the 100 as a brand could be used as part of your work?
Yes, we have. So ECB are very good in terms of consulting with Chance to Shine. I'd like to think that they're pretty proactive coming to us. In terms of the 100, the way we see it is if it does engage more children, then that's a really good thing for us. And the kind of conversations we've having with ECB so far, and to give you an example, are around our street projects, and next year in the run-up to the tournament, what we might be able to do to effectively help children play the format of the game that they then may see. But conversations are fairly sort of not advanced at the moment, but they absolutely have spoken to us about it.
Chris, have you had any conversations like that?
No. Small fry in the piece, so I wouldn't expect it. Okay,
thank you. Ian, do you have a question on this?
It was about these participation figures that I quoted earlier. I think you were all present here, which really worry me. And, you know, Chance to Shine I've been hearing about for well over 10 years, and I've seen it relatively locally in my North East Wales constituency as well. If all this good work is going on, then why is it that the figures are so disappointing?
From a Chance to Shine perspective, what I can tell you is the number of children that we have physically supported through the years. So on average at the moment, we support 500,000 children in state schools to take part in cricket. Of that, around 40,000 of them then go on into community. Now, I'm not saying that figure's perfect. I'm saying is those kids probably wouldn't have done that if our programme didn't exist. We can always do more, and one of the conversations we're having with ECB is actually how do we take what we know. So we've got some really good examples. To give you an example for Northumberland, they support 8,000 children through Chance to Shine this year. 1,000 of them went to a club or All Stars as a result of that programme. Now they're clearly doing something brilliant in the North East, and what we're going to be doing is we're investing in some research to look at the good examples that we've got around the country and actually how we can look to improve on that. But the other point that I would like to make is for us as a charity, a lot of those children probably may never go on to a cricket club, but they do tell us that they have a better affinity with sport, so their attitudes towards sport and how they've developed through the work that we do have really helped them. So 80% of the children that take part in Chance to Shine have improved their confidence, and over 60% of them say they have a healthier attitude towards sport as a result of taking part in the programme. If they go on to another sport, from our perspective, that's not a bad thing. We've helped them to develop a really positive attitude. There obviously is the other point that, in general, participation has been declining across all sports. That's not to make an excuse for cricket, but it's something that we need to be mindful of.
I'm conscious of the other panel members. I mean, do you think there's a problem with schools here? In the last 10, 15 years, do you think school involvement has declined?
I think Laura's hit the nail on the head really in that what you're referring to, the participation, hasn't often been the measure that's been most important. I think with some of the Chance to Shine activity, and of course I'm talking from quite a narrow geographical angle, but the school outcome has been the outcome in itself. You know, how many kids are doing school sessions. And actually, there's then an assumption that if they've had a good experience at school, then a certain percentage will move on. And there's so many other distractions. And again, I think this is it's possibly more of an urban issue. But kids have very, very busy lives, and they've got a lot of other distractions. Some of which are much easier to.
Just will they grow up?
Yeah. But. So yeah, I think that's what I think. Sometimes the age that's been focused on is wrong as well. I think this idea of doing it at a young age, rather than some of the interventions we've had, and Sport England money. I'm talking outside of cricket now as well, has generally been 14 and 16 focused, which it's just a little bit too late.
Thank you. Charles Watling.
Thank you, Joe. I get the impression the introduction of the 100 format is a generally popular thing. Does it?
I haven't spoken yet.
I'm so delighted you've now chosen this moment to open up. And there there's. I just wonder if you've had any evidence from children fans that perhaps the existing forms of cricket are far too complicated and difficult to understand, possibly with people from different areas that don't understand cricket because they come from different countries. But perhaps this might be a very popular diversion, this new introduction of the new 100 format. Andy, go on, you haven't spoken yet.
Well, thank you. I come from a background of the professional game. I was for 14 years in administration at Somerset in an honorary position, which is a posh way of saying it wasn't paid. And I also was elected to serve 2 terms on the main board of the ECB. So, if you like, that is the lens through which I have observed cricket. I buy into the school of thought that says the 100 is as Wisden aren't renowned for their intemperate language, but Wisden described it as an almighty punt, and others have described it as a reckless gamble, and that is what I think it is. This has the potential to split the game, and it has the potential to bankrupt a lot of the game. And I'm very happy to expand on that.
So you'd agree with Dr. Katie Scott, who commented the 100 is an unnecessary addition to an already crowded schedule which pushes all other games to the less temperate ends of the season. Do you think that might be the case?
Lawrence Booth, who's one of the better-known cricket journalists, described the schedule for next summer as a quart stuffed into a pint pot. I have a copy of the draft schedule here, and it's pretty clear when you look at the detail on this why that last year 86% of cricket fans, according to the Cricketer magazine Big Cricket Survey, opposed the 100, and this year the figure was 84%. So, the fans own this game. It's not owned by the administrators. And you are all reading your own social media feeds. We've been following it. Well, we've been sat here since 2:30 this afternoon. The fans feel as though the game is being taken away from them. They do not support the 100, and they can see the damage that it is going to do to the existing 3 formats.
Is that lack of support, in your view, because they don't support the format, or is it because perhaps it might damage the county games, the other areas?
Well, nobody supports the format. It's not played anywhere. As we heard earlier this afternoon, it was invented by a marketing committee somewhere within the ECB. Clearly, it is going to damage the other 3 competitions. The county championship, which is the bedrock of Test cricket, which is still the biggest financial contributor to this game of cricket in England, now finds itself principally played in April, May, and next year right through to the end of September. Well, you won't have to look very far to find professional cricketers and their coaches being justifiably critical of that. The 50, I think the trophies have now gone, but the memory of them lingers onwards.
That's all here. Out of shot.
The 50, I mean, the women started playing World Cup cricket in 1973, and it took them, I think, 46 years to win it, but they won it. And the men took 2 years less, 44 years before they won it. But they weren't won on a whim. They were won because it wasn't a plan 4 years ago. I think the plan was at least 7 years old, because I was on the board at the time. And next year, coming back specifically to your question, the 50 is not only deprived of the top 100 players in the country, there'll be no overseas players in it. It won't be played at any of the Test match grounds, and it will be played alongside the 100. So it is a second 11 calibre competition. What kind of preparation is that for us to defend those trophies over the next 4 years? Lastly, in the case of the Blast, Owen Morgan may have misspoke the truth a few weeks ago when the England white ball captain very boldly said, and good on him for saying it, there's no room for 4 competitions in England and Wales. Something has to go, and if the 100 stays, the Blast will go. One slight problem with that, if you take the Blast away, then I suspect you are consigning 10 non-test match grounds to a semi-professional future.
Thank you.
So Becky, I'm sorry to interrupt, John. Sorry. Becky, did you want to come in on that as well? I can just
Thank you.
Ask the question here.
Thank you. Sorry, so the Cricket Supporters Association is an independent, not-for-profit, which brings together cricket fans from across the spectrum to give them a voice. That's our aim. We believe that cricket fans have a really big role to play in the prosperity and growth of cricket and in the governance of cricket as we move forward, and can be really a positive influence on the game. So it's interesting because there absolutely is a split within cricket fans about the 100. And there are surveys such as The Cricketer, which is a well-known publication, but we have also had a recent survey and our responses were more polarised. So 52% do think that the 100 will have a negative impact on the existing county structure. But we are not here to be the Cricket Supporters Association isn't here to be anti the 100, but there are real and legitimate concerns about what it means for the rest of the game, as Andy was saying. There are the county structure, as Andy mentioned, what that means for then test players, and we all know that for fans, Test cricket is the pinnacle of the sport. How will that move forward? And then if we're not playing Test cricket very well, how will that affect the broadcast rights? Because, if England aren't playing Test cricket very well, then who would want to be showing them? So we have really big concerns for Test cricket, for the ODI, and I think from a cricket fan perspective, a large amount of that comes from the way that the 100 has been launched. It was originally said that it wasn't for existing cricket fans. You're basically saying during the peak of the summer, existing cricket fans, you just have to, watch whatever cricket is available, but it won't be the county cricket that you love. And a lack of what is perceived as a lack of transparency about it. We're not sure what success really looks like, how it will grow the recreational game or the first-class county game. So it's great to think there will be all these new people who love cricket, but how will they be driven to then support their county? How will they know about their local club? How will they know to go where they can go and play? So there's a lot of questions around it that I think that still need answering. And I think for cricket fans, that's, the questions that there are that still need to be answered.
I feel that I know the answer to this question before I ask it then. You don't think that the new format will engage new audiences and drive up participation generally across the board? Or?
It could be of interest to a new audience. Obviously, there's some great players playing in some great venues, and we all know if the sun's shining, there's nothing better than watching cricket. So absolutely, there is an opportunity to appeal to a new audience. And as I say, that's a great thing. We want more cricket fans. We want more people to engage in cricket. I think what isn't clear is how that will then work its way down as a funnel to the rest of the game.
Right. I'd like to hear Andy's view on that. Do you think we get new participants as a result of the 100 introduction?
Well, if we don't, the exercise, and to answer Mr. Stevens' earlier question, this is going to cost about 60 million a year to put on. 60 million. So if it doesn't get new fans, then it's going to be about 200 million or so invested over the period simply to cannibalise the existing game. And I cannot believe that is in the best interests of a national governing body to do that.
Do you think it's in the interest of the players because the players will no longer be exposed to the longer forms of the game? Do you think that would have a knock-on effect?
Well, I think you can't blame the players who have a short and perilous career for following the money. I would do the same in their shoes. We saw them apply for the draft on Sunday, but the reality is, in addition to there only being foreign coaches, overseas coaches, across the 8 teams, only 77 English players out of a total of 400 English players were picked up, and there were some 36, I think, Colpacks. So again, looking at social media this morning, you've got some pretty upset and cross cricketers who realised that they are being left on the sidelines. 20% of the English players, probably will earn nearly a year's salary for 6 weeks' work. Their teammates are back to the grind in the 50, playing in a second 11 competition, and a lot of that played on outgrounds.
Just a final question to all four of you. Do you think the ECB has engaged enough with you across the board? Particularly the fans.
Yeah, well, the fans. So in our recent survey, 90% of fans agreed that supporters need to be given the opportunity to work with the ECB to insist in keeping the game relevant. And that is an important factor to mention, that over half of the people that answered our survey agreed that cricket does need to evolve to remain relevant. I don't think there's any fan that's sitting here thinking cricket's just absolutely perfect as it is. We don't need to evolve. But I think that there is concerns about what the ECB, the decisions that are being made, and the fact that the fans aren't being consulted on this. Existing fans that are their kind of, you would imagine that they're the people they want to hold closest, are feeling left out of the loop. So 65% disagree that the ECB considers existing cricket fans when making important future decisions, and 55% disagree that the ECB are looking after the best interests of cricket. However, I will just add a caveat to that in the fact that as the Cricket Supporters Association, as we are developing and growing, we are establishing a working relationship with the ECB. So there is movement, particularly from our organisation, in terms of having a conversation with the ECB moving forward.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I can say from a school strategy perspective, because Inspiring Generations was mentioned quite a bit in the ECB session before, Chance to Shine have been consulted right from the outset, and we have been thoroughly involved in the conversations about how best to shape that.
Thank you.
Well, we heard earlier from Chairman of ECB that the counties and their fans had been consulted, and I think he even used the vote word. So I sent out a tweet to that effect, and I've had a blizzard of response, overwhelmingly saying we weren't consulted, the fans, and most definitely no vote. And I think just before I took the stand here, I'd heard back from fans of 12 of the 18 counties, and I think that would be a pretty uniform picture. So the fans are not behind this, and they're not going to get behind it because they can see the existential risk to the game of doing so.
I think the Twitter sphere might be interesting after this session. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Anthony, I should just ask one question. I mean, Joe Stevens asked a number of questions of Tom Harrison trying to get an idea of what the budget was. We didn't get very clear. You seem to know what the budget is. There was some shaking of heads behind you when you gave that figure. I just wanted to know where do you get that figure of 60
Well, the budget
million?
was in there's been a leak from the ECB. The budget was put into the public domain about 2 weeks ago. And you can clearly see that the expenditure, when you add to that the 19 times 1.3 million, will take it up to about 60 million. So the 100 is going to lose around 20 million a year over the duration, which is a pretty substantial sum, because you've had evidence, I think, from a gentleman, Christopher O'Brien, who, and Mr. Efford picked this up earlier. The plain fact is, the last 4 years for ECB has been a very disappointing year in terms of financial performance. It's lost 60 million at the pre-tax level, and the reserves have that correspondingly dropped from over 70 million to about 11. So this is one of the reasons it's called an almighty punt, is they really are betting the farm that the money that's coming in on the next TV deal, starting next year, is going to pay back with the investment in the 100. If it doesn't, who knows what the next TV deal will be renewed at, and therein lies the germ of potentially a major financial crisis for the game.
Clive Efford.
So, we've already covered part of what I was going to ask, but I'll sort of plough on. So, Mr. Nash, you resigned from the ECB last year over concerns about corporate governance. So do you think anything has improved since then?
I don't know, I think, is the answer. I mean, the reason I resigned, and I'm sorry to bring Mr. Stevens into this as a Glamorgan member, was that I discovered that a third of the ECB's reserves had been paid to Glamorgan by reading the Times newspaper. Now, given I was currently a serving director of the ECB, I didn't have a particularly high regard for that. And that wasn't the first transgression of corporate governance that I witnessed. A month after I went, of course, I was followed by Richard Thompson, the chairman of Surrey, also citing corporate governance failures. and the payments that were allegedly about to be made to other counties. And we were vindicated when the Good Governance Institute came back with their review that revealed no less, I think, than 11 areas requiring attention where there were shortfalls in the standards of corporate governance.
So just sort of drill into what's wrong about those payments specifically. I mean, is it not was it not an attempt to I don't know, redistribute the money that's coming into the game that comes in? You know, lots of money comes in through the big ticket games of test matches and all the rest of it. Those counties that are not part of that, if you don't redistribute that around the game, is that what that was an attempt to do, or was it something else?
You'd have to ask Chairman of ECB what the intent was behind it, because I still haven't personally received an explanation. And I'm equally baffled in the case of Mr Lucas's county that Durham received the most severe reprimand and penalty points for their financial straitened circumstances. Well, the Glamorgan were in an equally straitened financial circumstances, and I think we're still waiting to hear why there was no penalty levied on them.
Right. Okay. And so, what was the reaction of other counties then when this was going on? We've heard that board members were resigning. I mean, does the structure that exists in the corporate governance, does it allow for counties to raise their concerns about issues like this?
Well, the reaction of the counties at the time was one of, I think, unbridled fury, and that resulted in if there were going to be any further payments, they certainly weren't made. But we did read in the press that other counties had been given promises of further payments. As regards corporate governance now, I can't speak to that because I've been off the board for some 18 months. But as you can imagine, it is an issue of some importance when the reserves are now as low as they are. Payments to the counties are a very important and a very closely followed aspect of ECB governance.
So how financially sustainable is the existing county structure?
Well, despite the fact I've set rather a negative tone thus far, it's got to be said last year was a fantastic success for cricket. An enormous success, apart from the fact we are now double world champions, which I think bears reiteration. There was an outstanding series for the Ashes, on a par probably with 1981 in terms of the fans' engagement. And it was an all-round outstanding year for the game, which again begs the question, why on earth put it all at risk when the participation is turning around and the followership and fanship is climbing, by introducing something completely different? A lot of people in the game are completely baffled as to why that is thought to be the best way to proceed.
And on the issue of bidding for test matches, what are the implications of reducing the number of test matches that counties can bid for to 6 from 2020?
Well, for the test match grounds, of which there are now, I think, 8, that is an enormously important part of their revenue. So the ECB has probably quite rightly taken certain compensatory steps. For example, Notts are now going to host the final of the 50-over competition, albeit sadly it's not going to be now at a level that it once was. And I think Edgbaston has the long-term rights or agreement to host the T20 finals day. On which point I must mention, lest I forget it, it's taken us 16 years to get T20 right here in England. 16 years. But we've got there finally, with attendances up 54% in the last 5 years. Many games now are sell-out. The counties couldn't conceivably do without it. Next year's schedule, disappointing then that the final is 3 months after the end of the group stages. And
you'll have to enlighten us as to the reason for that. So, is that because
the fact is, I come back to Owen Morgan's point. You can't fit 4 competitions into the English domestic summer. It's just not sustainable. Everybody in cricket knows it.
Okay, and the fallow year payment that was made to Glamorgan, has that had any sort of knock-on impact, and for instance, for other counties to be able to attract third-party investment?
I don't know is the answer to that, I'm afraid, Mr. Efford. But I mean, you've got the additional complication at Glamorgan, where I think a large creditor, I think I'm right in saying, was Cardiff City Council, who were, I think, had to take a write-off on their debt. That certainly has a knock-on to other counties who were looking to local authorities or councils to help them fund things like ground development.
And others may want to comment on this. The ECB's independent governance review recommended that they take a wider view of stakeholder engagement. Has there been any change in the approach from your perspective?
Not that we've seen. So as I say, I mean, we are now developing a relationship with the ECB from a fan's perspective, but I couldn't comment on other stakeholders.
Do you have a comment on that?
I certainly have a comment, which is that we did hear that all is sweetness and light between ECB and the counties. I would suggest that isn't quite the case. If you haven't had the opportunity of speaking to some of the county chairmen, I would certainly encourage you to do so. But it is worthy of note that there is a document now circulating which relates to the formation of a professional game board within cricket. And, Chairman, you referred to this earlier, and that one exists already in the case of both soccer and rugby union. And I think that was always going to be an inevitable consequence of disenfranchising the 18 first-class counties and the MCC from the ECB main board. It's the only NGB in sport to have done so, and that could only ever result in a pushback, because the 18 counties and the MCC own all the grounds and employ all the players, whereas at least in the case of the FA they own Wembley and the RFU own Twickenham, but that's not the case in cricket.
Okay, and can I just ask Laura and Chris, looking on all this and the way it's been described, do you have any concerns about how it will impact on your work in the future? Or the financial situation?
Oh, the financial situation.
Which may be impacted on by them.
Yeah. Yes, of course. I think there is some positive noises that are attached to the new ECB strategy about how it's going to enable county boards to work in partnership with the third sector and other organisations to do some of the work around engaging new audiences, and also using cricket to work on social outcomes, which probably it's not hitting its potential on at the moment. I think the 100 in particular, I think the idea of the sort of the simplified format, I think that's going to be helped if we can weave that into youth participation somewhere. It's obviously going to be much easier to understand if people are playing the same format, which I'm not aware of that happening at the moment. But I personally think there's a place for competitive cricket that sits alongside Chance to Shine schoolwork and All Stars cricket, which is bringing kids into clubs, because we find that the kids who tend to choose football or other games, they tend to choose those games because there's an opportunity to compete more readily, an opportunity to represent more readily. And of course, there are also the things which keep kids involved, or prevent kids from getting involved in gangs and getting involved in radicalisation and so on, is if they have a peer group, they have a support network, they're using their time positively, they have opportunities for sort of accolades and to succeed. So perhaps the 100 presents that opportunity.
I'll add to that and completely agree in terms of competition. The whole reason Street was developed was on a bedrock of competition for young people. I completely agree. They turn up week in, week out, and they want to test themselves. They want to play against each other, but they want to play against people from different parts of the country, different parts of their locality. And every child that takes part in street is given the opportunity to take part in local, regional, and national competition. And we've got some brilliant examples, actually. If you take Yorkshire as an area where some of our projects in Chickenley and Kirklees come together to play against each other. But the teams actually self-identified that there was a disparity in terms of standard, and they actually said, well, can we mix ourselves up to make it a bit more even so we can have more fun? And those children were from very different backgrounds. We had white working class, British, South Asian, young people, but competition really does make a big difference, and for girls as well as boys. So our street competitions, there's a girls' pathway as much as there is boys. I think going back, Mr. Efford, to your question around the investment in the game, and I sit here as an independent charity, so we are anticipating an uplift in funding from ECB around the desire to support more young people, which is fantastic. But standing by ourselves in terms of good governance, we obviously look to diversify our fundraising as much as we can. We have a relationship with Sport England, but we also fundraise through other means, through individuals that support us, through events, through trusts and foundations, through corporate partners, and it's really important to us that we continue to do that as an independent charity.
Do any of you have a view on the issue of gambling making so much money out of cricket and not putting anything back in?
I hate it. I mean, I think, it seems ridiculous that, especially within cricket, where as a fan you do always, when remarkable things happen, as they do, you think, I'm sure that if someone bowls a really bad ball, that's got to just be a legitimate bad ball. But there is always we've all been, know that gambling and spot fixing, that does happen within cricket, hopefully not widespreadly. But and so the idea that betting companies make so much money on the game that we love and don't put anything back into the game, I think is ridiculous.
It's a huge issue for cricket. I know that ECB, along with other national governing boards overseas, take it incredibly seriously because of the involvement of professional criminalised gangs. And they put a huge amount of time and effort, quite rightly, into trying to protect and educate the players and also the ground staff who are trying to spot those involved in this at ground level, but very difficult.
I would echo what Becky said in terms of if there's money being made there, I think there's a responsibility to invest some. I would say from a Chance to Shine perspective, we would not have a direct relationship with a gambling firm as a young person's charity on our programmes, but if they were to invest in the good of the game, I would be supportive.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Obviously, the negative side of gambling disproportionately affects the communities where cricket is played least. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Charles, quick question on this.
Yes, a very quick question. We've done a bit of 100 bashing, but I just want to look on the positive side of things and just ask this very simple question. There's been a lot of excitement engendered around cricket thanks to these great victories, and as you say, a fantastic summer of cricket that we've just had. In a positive way, what way forward should we go? I mean, we can talk about the engagement of the kids, we can talk about the engagement of small communities, but how do we harness that excitement?
Well, can I just say that from the professional games point of view, there is a ready-made solution on the shelf. It's the one that we recommended in 2016 when I chaired a domestic structure review group, and that was that the T20 should be divisionalised, 9 teams in both. The top team would become the English Premier League, and hey presto, there is England's answer to the very successful IPL and BBL.
And in your view, a simple off-the-shelf?
It's still there, and I think it's still what the fans would like, and it is my contention it would be a far more hard-headed business route to follow, because it's much lower risk than the 100. It'll cost nothing like as much as the 100 to get off the ground. And bear in mind, Harvard Business School, the definitive study on new product development, 80 to 90% of new products launched in the Western world fail. Cricket can't afford, if this 100 goes ahead, it can't afford it to fail, because we will be left with an existential financial crisis. So where is the justification for taking such a high-risk route when there's the ready-made solution on the shelf that I think virtually all stakeholders, but most of all the fans, would be cheering it from the rooftops.
Can I move that question on to how do we harness the excitement with the engagement of fans? Children as well.
From a children perspective, we've certainly seen an increase in schools reaching out to us on the back of the World Cup, asking how they can have cricket and how Shine can support. Ultimately, we are bound by the resources that we have. We support 1 in 4 state schools. We're in 200 communities, and if we can do more, we can engage more young people. At the moment, in terms of being able to reach further than our physical resource in terms of our coaching network, is we've developed a digital portal which every school in the country can access free of charge, so they can deliver high quality PE, cricket PE through schools. It's completely mapped to the national curriculum, and there are World Cup themed resources on there, so enabling them to be able to continue to access that, bring the joy in, and ultimately help children continue to participate. I think it is about giving them access to grassroots cricket opportunities. We have some, we're not the only solution. We need to work in partnership with others. I think government has a part to play there as well, certainly around the School Sport and Physical Activity Action Plan and helping us get an hour a day of physical sport and activities for young people. I think there's also a bit there around helping us further diversify and engage communities through programmes like Street and others as well.
Thank you. Great.
I would add in the free-to-air, obviously, discussion here, because as we all know, with the Cricket World Cup, there was 4.5 million watched the World Cup final on Channel 4, which is terrific. Imagine how many more would have watched it if they'd been able to see some of the build-up to the World Cup final. It wasn't just the last thing. And I know it's also terrific on free-to-air. People are talking about cricket, and then the Ashes are on, and they can't watch it again. So it's suddenly gone behind a screen. Unless you're a cricket fan, ardent, that will pay the money, you can't watch Ashes cricket again. So I think the free-to-air side of it is really important. Anecdotally, my little boys at their school, we're the odd family because we play cricket, we love cricket, but his friends were all talking about cricket, and then suddenly it's just, it's out of consciousness, and the football season starts and it's all about football again. So I think the free-to-air argument is a really big one. We are very much behind the idea, and 95% of our members agree that there should be some part of all ICC tournaments moving forward that have a free-to-air, that are free-to-air, whether that's online or on TV, and that should just be how it is moving forward, so that the build-up to the final can take place and people can get really behind it, because then you are building the heroes. And I do think having a hero, having household names, it does then keep cricket relevant. So that it's part of the household conversation instead of a one hit, which was terrific, but then it's gone again.
Good point, well made.
Thank you. Julian.
Yeah, thank you. I will come on to terrestrial TV in a second. I just want to drill down in that. But first of all, Mr. Nash, you said earlier that you thought the 100, or you stated the 100 will lose 20 million in the first year. How do you get that figure?
By subtracting the revenue from the costs.
Right. Okay, so the revenue has been the TV revenue.
The TV is the most significant part of the annual revenue, but there's also money in the budget for overseas rights, commercial deals, and so on.
Okay. Right. Is the result of the advent of the 100 a reflection, to a certain extent, of the fact that the game is very top heavy? For years and years, the game has relied on Test cricket in order, and then the subsequent broadcast rights of Test cricket in order to effectively pay for county cricket. Is the fact that there is this disconnect, this difference in the power base due to that financial reality?
You mean the power base between different counties?
No, I mean between the ECB and the counties themselves. The fact is that, as we know, ECB does separate contracts. It gets the revenue comes through from Test cricket in order basically to for the counties to function. This is not meant to be disrespecting a county, which I actually love, but beggars can't be choosers in that respect.
I mean, the ECB is the counties, and vice versa. It's just that on occasions that can be quite a testy relationship, especially when it comes to carving up the financial cake. But the As of now, I think the ECB has, Colin was elected and I was one of those who elected him, there were only 19 of us, on a platform of cutting cost and complexity at the ECB. That hasn't happened. The headcount, in fact, has gone from 250 in 2014 to 372 this year, and that is before we add in the incremental posts who will be employed by the 100. So that means there are now more people working for the ECB than there are playing professional cricket here in England and Wales. So when we talk about cost, which I took to be the seat of your question, I think the cricket has to look in on itself at the amount of costs it's currently got tied up in administration. And again, I keep coming back to there's a hard-headed way forward that plays the percentages for English domestic cricket. I hope for all of our sakes, for those of us who are fans of the game, that the right decision ultimately will be taken.
The kernel, because actually really is to do with that power imbalance between the ECB and the counties. If you take football, for example, you've got they've got the Premier League is the FA Premier League. Okay, the FA Premier League is a very powerful body, but it's not going to do stuff like against Manchester United, Manchester City, etc., etc.
Yeah.
In this instance, what you're suggesting, although the ECB are very strenuous to suggest that they've had a vote and that this is effectively a majority decision, what you're suggesting is that effectively that this has been run roughshod over the counties. Is that not just the circumstance of that power imbalance due to the financial situation that most counties find themselves in, vis-a-vis in relation to the ECB?
Look, the ECB do an awful lot of good as well. We've heard that from the grassroots. A lot of the things that they're doing, such as All Stars, South Asian project, women's cricket, has been up until recently terrific. But there's always going to be a power struggle between where the money is being given up within cricket, and I think there's no doubt at the moment there's a major power struggle going on between the counties and ECB over how the doubling of the media deal, because it's coming at 1.1 billion compared to 425 million for 5 years, is going to flow through the game. And I think that the counties aren't going to rebel from ECB. They're going to do what's happened in football and in rugby union. They will set up their own umbrella group within the auspices of ECB. But I'm pretty clear that you will see a transition of power away from the ECB centre back towards the counties. It's going to be redressed along the lines I think you're alluding to there in football.
You're talking about basically a split in the game.
Yeah, where the clubs are more powerful.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fairlie-Clarke, does the format, from a cricket fan perspective, does the format of the 100 offer anything that's new, refreshing? Are you looking forward to seeing it next summer?
The feedback that I have is as I say, it's very split. So say 64% are saying no, that they won't go and watch cricket in the ground. 40% are saying no, they won't go and watch it online. But then caught up in all that is also the idea that they don't really know. There's not as much about it as they want to be able to. They're
just reading like negative headlines.
Yeah. So, and I would also say that a younger audience, so the 16 to 24-year-olds in our survey do seem to be more keener on it than the older audience, as you might expect.
So it appeals to a younger demographic?
Potentially, yes. So, but I think in terms of the format, there's still bowling, there's still batting, there's still overs. So it's not... Yes, we all want to see good cricketers play cricket, but no, there's nothing in the format that I think particularly appeals to existing cricket fans, because we understand the game, we love the game, and I don't really also understand the idea that it's going to be easier for people to understand, because as far as I'm aware, people can count to 6 or they can count to 10, and so yeah, I think there's still, as I say, there's a real mix amongst cricket fans, but there's generally a lot of, as you know, negativity around it as well.
Laura and Chris, actually, I'll just bring you in sort of from the perspective of someone who works in grassroots cricket. What do you think the impact of the 100 could be on grassroots?
I mean, I think the interesting part of it is the number one, the players, you know, the kind of the quality and the backgrounds of players that come into it, and the impact that will have. I think also there's some you can see some of the logic behind moving towards the kind of city-based thing, because I think the status quo and the rejigging of the status quo in any way is not really having an impact on a lot of the sort of kids that we work with. You know, so the kids that we work with, they come under, in South East London, they come under Kent as a county, and that they wouldn't have been to Canterbury, you know, don't know that they're in Kent. So there's not that engagement, and of course generally what brings people into participating in sport, and certainly into supporting the sport, is either their background in playing or their affiliation to a town or a region or a city or that sort of thing. So I think there's some logic behind that side of it. I think the format will only prove of any use if, as I said earlier, if kids are playing in a similar format. I think if they're playing in the same format, if it's T20, I think they can relate to it just as easily.
Laura?
We haven't specifically surveyed children around formats, because I guess where we operate, they get enjoyment from whacking a ball and hitting a bat and ball and just generally playing the game. I would say in terms of street, we know they do like a short format, and they like street effectively is countdown cricket, so it's 20 balls, it's fast, it's fun, it's loud. And I can see that if the 100 brings that kind of environment, that yes, it would appeal to young people. Clearly, we're not there yet, so we need to wait and see. From our perspective, whether it's 100, T20, some kids probably like test matches, if they're into it. But actually, it's mostly about them physically, regularly participating in the game. And as I said before, we are very willing to work with the ECB around testing the 100 in the run-up to the competition with young people as part of our street programme to see how it goes down and get them involved.
Do you both find, Chris, Laura, that effectively at the moment what's happening is a bit like with the Premier League in other countries? I imagine it's quite frustrating being a Korean footballer or a Korean, and you walk around and basically got an Arsenal shirt or a United shirt on. Is this the case with like the IPL? Are we finding that lots of young people are walking around with Coley shirts on and that sort of thing? Is that?
No, I think we're finding that when we walk around with Man United shirts
right.
on and Arsenal. No, but it's a serious point, really, because I think there are as many things that we can learn from that as there are from another cricket format.
I would agree. I can even give you an example. I went to a primary school in Luton where those kids are absolutely cricket crazy. They love their cricket, and they couldn't actually name many professional cricketers, but they loved the sport. They were learning through it, and they really enjoyed it. So from our perspective, it was almost like the job is done in terms of engaging them. If they pick up role models along the way, that is fantastic. I don't think we're quite at the stage where they're wearing shirts yet, though. I would quite agree.
Becky, just final question, on. I'll ask you two for maybe. For terrestrial TV, you said before you wanted to see free to air. Do you recognise as a trade-off though in terms of Sky, the money, etc.? Because I heard a story that effectively when negotiations were once carried out with the terrestrial broadcaster, the terrestrial broadcaster asked the BBC, asked cricket basically, how much are you going to pay us to show cricket?
Okay.
Do you recognise that sort of trade-off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we'd all be ridiculous if we didn't recognise the amount of money that Sky have put into cricket and are putting into cricket, and the good work that has been done with those funds. So that's why I think with our membership we're talking about ICC tournaments as well. So obviously that's a slightly different ball game. But yeah, so I think we can totally understand that. But I guess it is just what compromise can be made? Where can there be some more free-to-air coverage? And we always, think of Test cricket, but I would be the first to think, would a terrestrial TV broadcaster want to put 5 days of cricket on? That's a lot of the schedule. Let's not be, but can there be, just more instances where there is free-to-air, whether it's with domestic games, the county games, the international or whatever the tournament might be. But I can't help but think all the great work that these guys do on the ground is terrific, but then if these kids are not in a cricket family and these kids go home and they love cricket, but then they have no other way of accessing cricket because their parents aren't going to pay for Sky, they're not going to massively show them the way to see cricket, then how can they carry on? How can they get into participate? How can they, because there's only so much that a kid can do on their own unless they can go, look at it on the, look at this is the great game, this is the game that I play. And I don't know, I think it's a shame that there's all this terrific work going on and yet there's obviously a disconnect along the way.
You mean basically it's effectively the biggest way of actually getting into their lives is not being utilised properly. That's the sort of...
Yeah, I mean, we all know that TVs are, I don't know what the figure is for in every household, but, most families...
Finally, in terms of, we just mentioned about Sky, the money going in, the flip side of that, do you sometimes feel, frankly, as a cricket fan, that you're being milked quite often, the ticket prices? Test cricket, I mean, I used to go, and it used to be like, I remember I was a Surrey member many years ago, it was about 15 quid to go and see a test match in 2002. It's now 120 quid. Or 100 quid to see a test match.
Yeah.
Or the World Cup final, I think it was £250 in certain stands. Is that like, as a cricket fan, it's a really expensive undertaking?
Absolutely, and I think there are definitely instances where ticket prices are crazy high, but actually in our research, cricket is seen as quite good value compared to other sports for fans, because if you think it is an expensive ticket, but it is the whole day. So, you're getting entertained from 10:30 till 6:30, whenever stumps are, so that's quite a long time. So absolutely, I think there's a concern about ticket prices, there's a concern about the fact that you pay for Sky or you pay for BT Sport, but, that's the world that we currently live in, so... we're used to it, but yeah, I think ticket prices, and then the secondary ticketing is obviously a really important factor for fans, because that was crazy, that can be crazy. So
thank you. I'm conscious that we've been going for 3 hours and 20 minutes now. I think we could have even accommodated a T20 game within the span of this session. So I've got a quick question from Clive Efford, then we'll
just comment on that last answer, and the argument that's been put to me when I've discussed this in the past with the ECB about taking a test match from, say, the Ashes and putting it on terrestrial TV is that it would result in a huge reduction in the amount of money they would get for their TV rights, which seriously hits into their ability to invest in the grassroots activities. So, I'm not putting that forward as an argument, but I would be interested to hear your comment on that.
I would love to know what, from other cricket fans, whether that would be a worthwhile trade-off, because I think everybody would love to see Test cricket on free to air. It's the pinnacle of the game. We know that all of our members, it's the sport they want to watch, it's the format they want to watch the most, spend their money on everything. But when you put it like that, if that, what would the trade-off be to get?
I should add what the pro quo to that was the highlights package. That what they got was on terrestrial TV was the highlights package. So you got truncated coverage rather than encouraging kids to sit around all day for 5 days, which I used to do. And watch an entire test match. And would they, in this day and age, are they better off with a truncated a set of highlights?
Well, I do think it's true, and actually I know that Tom Harrison covered it earlier. I mean, the way that children have media, consume media, that's the word I'm looking for, is so different these days. So we shouldn't get too hooked up just on TV, I guess, there are the online channels, there are through social media channels, etc. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is to that, I'm afraid, and I would love to. I think it's something we'll have to go out to our fans with in terms of the test match cricket. I'll see what they say.
Thank you. If I could ask one final question, just to Andy Nash, I just wanted to pick up on something you said earlier on. Julian and I were talking about you were both talking about the comparison between football and cricket. I think, as Julian was alluding to, the massive difference between the football authorities, and we had them sitting on that bench on Monday, is that the Premier League generates the cash, not the FA. So whereas in cricket, it seems that the cash is really generated through the national game, the ECB, and the counties are reliant on that money. And a lot of counties are in quite substantial financial difficulties as well and require ECB support. I mean, I was interested in what you said about the way the counties might try and organise themselves, but I mean, ultimately, can you see a scenario where they are no longer reliant on ECB financial support?
There's a number of questions in there, Chairman. I mean, firstly, I don't accept that most cricket counties have financial problems. I think there are...
I said a good number.
There's about 200 million of debt in the game, but most of that's accounted for by just 4 counties. The other 14 plus MCC don't have a particular debt issue. As far as the rights are concerned, I think you are going to see the pendulum swing back towards the counties. I think in particular they'll look to monetise the T20 Blast.
By that, do you mean that they would seek to do as the Premier League did, which is to negotiate the broadcast contract for that themselves?
Yes, if you see there's no reason why you shouldn't ask to see it, the document that's circulating in relation to the Professional Game Board, you will see in there that they intend... and they've already had research carried out on the media value of the T20 Blast. And I think they intend to take control of the domestic schedule and in part take control of the media value that's ascribed to that.
And would they share the TV money equally between all the counties and T20 Blast?
I mean, that's an issue for them. You would hope that at least it will be equitable. And it doesn't look as though it's going to be equitable in the 100 because the host venues for the men's game, which as ECB have told us by their own page ender, gap they think is worth 10 times more than the women's game.
Yeah.
The funds ascribed to that will principally flow through to the 8 Test match grounds.
Yeah, but the reason I ask is obviously in the Premier League, TV revenue is equalised. So it's true. Manchester United's matchday revenue is higher than Burnley's, but nevertheless the TV money that underpins it is the same. And if you didn't have that in a 2-tier T20 Blast, my concern would be that you'd accelerate a process where the big wealthy counties get richer and richer and the smaller ones just fall away because they just can't compete.
I think that will happen under the 100, there's no doubt about that, but I think what's interesting is the fact the counties are now cooperating on their own PGB, I think means that some of the largest, like Surrey, I think actually have a lot of respect for the 18-county system and they've no real wish to see 8 of them break away as in elite status. So I think there's reasons for optimism there that the ECB, PGB will settle down in the years to come and hopefully we will see a financial settlement that promotes not just 18 counties. Why not have 24? I mean, Durham joined. Why shouldn't the likes of Norfolk and others join in? They should have the incentive. And you touched on that earlier with the pyramid structure. And why not have promotion and relegation?
Yes, I mean, I wasn't thinking necessarily of a bigger county championship, but that people may, you have a promotion and relegation. But of course, if you have that sort of pyramid, or if you either have a bigger championship where the money is shared equally, so everyone gets a bit less because there's more of them, or you have some getting a lot and others not very much. I think there are challenges whichever way you try and cut the cake. And I mean, and finally, do you think? Problem with the rest of the players themselves, so that ultimately the players will go where the money is, and if there aren't formats that can reward the players, they'll go and play elsewhere.
They will. You can't blame them for that. And the other thing that's arisen, I think, since Sunday with the draft is that the players are beginning to realise that actually we're probably better off being at a test team venue, because it looks as though, when you look at the Trent Rockets, who picked mainly Notts players, and not a single player from their neighbours being Derby and Leicester. Now that sends a pretty loud message through the professional community and their agents, and I think that would be an extremely negative development for the game.
Well, I think we'll have to draw stumps there, I'm afraid, but